Chapter 975. Everybody was dumbstruck. They had just said that Bufong couldn't even trigger the lightning punishment. However, in just a blink of an eye, dark clouds covered the sky, and the thunder dragon roared. A steamed bun could trigger the lightning punishment? Everybody took in a breath of cold air. Xianyuan Xian was bewildered after listening to Xianyuan Xiaohui. Was it safe? But could a steamed bun make someone heaven chief? There were many heaven chief in the immortal city, but the chefs who could become heaven chief had to use their best dishes to take the test. Each of those dishes was exquisite. In terms of color, smell, and other aspects, they could crush any other dishes. Each of those dishes had a chance to be recorded in the heaven chief's menu. When people knew that Bufong was going to use steamed bun to take the heaven chief test, no one thought highly of Bufong. Steamed bun was such a simple dish. How could he become heaven chief? In terms of color, smell, and other aspects, there was nothing special about it. There were steamed buns in the heaven chief's realm, but they were just street snacks, which couldn't be considered elegant. He triggered the lightning punishment. I can't believe it. Anyway, so what if he triggered the lightning punishment? Didn't he trigger the lightning punishment in the special grade chef test? What happened? Triggering the lightning punishment doesn't mean he can become heaven chief. The audience lifted their heads to look at the dark clouds, their faces filled with disbelief. Triggering the lightning punishment was just one step. The most important thing was to refine the original energy of the ingredients and condense it into immortal energy. Only by condensing immortal energy could one become heaven chief. Brother, can the steam bun really become heaven chief? Looking at Bufong, who was standing with his hands clasped behind his back, Xianyuan Xian's eyes were a little confused. Hearing this, Xianyuan Xiaohui became solemn and serious. Little Xian, don't think that only exquisite dishes can make you a heaven chief. A truly powerful chef can condense immortal energy from any dish and help him become a heaven chief. It could be a bowl of porridge, a bun, or even a bowl of noodles. Only such a heaven chief can condense immortal energy. Xianyuan Xiaohui said seriously. Xianyuan Xian nodded, as if he understood. However, there was still some doubt on her face. She didn't completely believe it. Xianyuan Xiaohui sighed and didn't say much. Rumble. Thunder boomed in the sky. The pitch-black clouds emitted an oppressive aura. A thunder dragon emitting a dazzling blue light was surging in the clouds, making deafening sounds from time to time. Suddenly, a thunder dragon seemed to rush down from the clouds, scattering the pitch-black clouds. Even the air seemed to be torn apart, emitting whistling sounds as if it was constantly being torn apart. The audience exclaimed in surprise. Their eyes widened as they looked at the center. Every time a thunder punishment appeared, it always shocked the audience and made them clamor. After all, the appearance of a thunder punishment almost meant the birth of a heaven chief. Bufong stood where he was, very calm. His vermilion robe fluttered unceasingly in the wind. Slowly opening his eyes, Bufong's mental force spread out like water. He raised his head and looked at the oppressive pitch-black clouds that filled his entire eye sockets. He gently exhaled. A moment later, his mind flickered. Specks of white light appeared at his side. The light spots kept condensing. Soon, they formed a formation next to his body. The formation spun, and the wind howled. The strong wind blew, causing many people's eyes to be filled with astonishment. They craned their necks, their hair fluttering in the wind. A teleportation formation? Is that the mortal chef's protector? I remember that the mortal chef has an earth immortal puppet, which can resist the thunder punishment, the audience said. However, when the audience saw the giant figure emerging from the formation, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the room that the Heaven Chief Hall had specially prepared for the Heaven Chief's test. It had a special thunder protection formation which could resist the lightning strikes from the sky. Therefore, the mortal chef's earth immortal puppet was of no use at all. Why did he summon the earth immortal puppet? Was it just for fun? Some audience members couldn't help but sneer. Indeed, to them, this scene was a little funny. Rumble. Thunder roared. They recklessly charged down from the sky. Xiaobai appeared from the teleportation formation. His eyes twinkled, and lightning crackled on his body. Bu Fong clasped his hands, his mind locked on the steamer. Apparently, it was the critical moment. Whitey turned its head and looked at the thunder dragon in the sky. A bright light flashed in its eyes. A clanging sound rang out. The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back opened. Wow, what does that Earth Immortal puppet want to do? Does he want to resist the lightning punishment? What a pity. The Thunder Protection Formation is here. It's none of his business. That Earth Immortal puppet is so cute. How I wish I had one. When the audience saw Xiao Bai's expression, they all laughed out loud. The appearance of the Earth Immortal puppet seemed to add a layer of joy to the tense Heaven Chief's test. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Of course, Xiao Bai didn't know what they were laughing about. His metal wings spread open, and from within, bolts of lightning shot out and smashed onto the ground. Even the ground seemed to have been cracked open. In Xiao Bai's eyes, there were only lightning bolts falling from the sky. They were his food. Each time he swallowed a lightning punishment, Xiao Bai's fighting capacity would increase. Of course, if Xiao Bai wanted to increase his competence, he would need to swallow more lightning punishments. However, Xiao Bai's fighting capacity was equal to a 1-star true immortal realm expert. Bu Fong's lightning punishment was Xiao Bai's food. Boom! 80's legs bent. Then it leaped up. The metal wings on its back flapped, stirring up a gust of wind. Swoosh! Like an arrow, it shot straight up. All of a sudden, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes shrank. In his line of sight, as the lightning dragon descended, it was blocked by a dark green formation. The thunder dragon hit the formation. Lightning bolts scattered everywhere. The thunder dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws as if it wanted to break the formation. Whitey suddenly stopped moving forward. It seemed to feel a little strange. Ha ha! That silly puppet is dumbstruck. He found that he's useless, so he doesn't know what to do. What a flashy entrance. What an amusing use. The audience laughed unscrupulously. They could see that Xiao Bai wanted to resist the lightning punishment. However, with the lightning protection formation, Xiao Bai couldn't do anything. Manager Chen clasped his hands, stroking his beard. The corners of his mouth curled up. The room for the Heaven Chief's test is well prepared. The lightning protection formation is the key to make the chefs focus on their dishes. Tong Cheng's eyes widened. He greedily gazed at Xiao Bai in the void. He was so excited. He was so curious about Xiao Bai's Earth Immortal puppet that could swallow lightning. He wanted to take it for himself. Xiao Bai seemed a little perplexed. His mechanical eyes moved. A moment later, his eyes focused. The light in his mechanical eyes was so sharp that it could cut the starry sky. A black hole appeared in Xiao Bai's abdomen. Then, the war god's stick appeared in his hand. Lightning continuously wound around the war god's stick, making sizzling sounds. His fan-like hand grabbed the war god's stick. The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back flapped. A moment later, the war god's stick fiercely swept out. The void seemed to shatter under that attack. The audience's laughter stopped abruptly. They were like ducks whose necks were grabbed. Everybody was dumbstruck. The war god's stick grew bigger and bigger in their eyes. Shortly, it turned into a giant pillar. Xiao Bai hugged it and hit the lightning protection formation. Boom! A loud, ear-piercing explosion rang out. Under this impact, the entire room shook unceasingly. Oh my God! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and a dumbfounded look appeared on their faces. That Earth Immortal puppet. Was it crazy? Manager Chen almost pulled his beard out. Was that Earth Immortal puppet sick? Why did it attack the lightning protection formation? No one understood Xiao Bai's intention. Tong Chung was so excited that he jolted up from his seat. Both of his hands grabbed the railing, and the jade beads in his hands rolled to the ground. What an intelligent Earth Immortal puppet. Too perfect. Too perfect. I must have it. Boom. The lightning protection formation was hit by the war god's stick, and cracks appeared instantly. The thunder dragon roared and roared. In just a blink of an eye, the formation was broken. The thunder dragon's power rocketed, breaking the barrier of the lightning protection formation and storming into the room where the Heaven Chief's test was held. Then, it charged straight at Bu Fong, who was in the middle of the room. The audience was petrified by this turn of events. They only had one word left in their minds. They didn't expect to see such an explosive scene in the Heaven Chief's test. That mortal chef had summoned an Earth immortal puppet, and now he had fallen into a trap. Of course, after being surprised, some people gloated over his misfortune. They were happy to see the mortal chef's efforts go to waste. Xinyuan Xiaohui and Bu Fang's friends were startled. Manager Chen stood up with a frown on his face. The smile on Mu Luer's face disappeared. She was worried about Bu Fang. Xiao Bai landed on the ground. The ground caved in instantly. However, a moment later, Xiao Bai's figure soared up into the sky. His mechanical eyes twinkled. The war god's stick became thinner, and his figure appeared above Bu Fang's head in a flash. Boom! The thunder dragon hit Xiao Bai's body. Lightning instantly burst forth, so resplendent that it almost blinded people's eyes. Many people were startled, and many were frightened, because they found Xiao Bai grabbed the thunder dragon and tore it apart. In the end, it turned into lightning bolts and was sucked into his stomach. The thunder dragon that was falling was eaten. This scene made the audience completely dumbfounded, and the whole place was silent. All that was left was the sound of panting. It was Tong Cheng's greedy panting. Boom! Xiao Bai landed by Bu Fang. Lightning arcs flashed on his body. At this moment, the audience noticed that Bu Fang didn't move at all. It seemed he wasn't worried that the lightning would hit him. He clasped his hands, his eyes indifferent. It was as though what had just happened had nothing to do with him. This mortal chef was so calm. All of a sudden, Bu Fang's mental force swept out, gathering in his head. Bu Fang let out a long sigh. In the sky, the layers of black clouds scattered. As the sun appeared, sunlight shone down from above, covering Bu Fang's body like pieces of gold that were scattered all over the ground. In the room, everybody looked at Bu Fang, their eyes dazzled. Bu Fang's dish was done. His mind flickered. Bu Fang walked to the black turtle constellation walk. The steamer opened. Immediately, rays of light shot out from the steamer, and the audience let out cries of surprise. Xinyuan Xiaohui and the others craned their necks curiously. Whether Bu Fang would become the Heaven Chief or not, it would be decided at this moment. Tong Cheng's attention shifted from Xiao Bai to Bu Fang. This mortal chef had finally finished cooking. Could he become the Heaven Chief? Everybody held their breaths, gazing at the steamer in the black turtle constellation walk. Soon, the beams of light scattered. Hot air rose up like a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky, and then it collapsed and dispersed. Inside the steamer, 5 jade-like, sparkling buns were quietly moving. Steam lingered around them, giving off brilliant lights. However, when the audience saw the buns, their eyes shrank. These buns don't have immortal energy. Chapter 976. 5 steamed buns lay quietly in the steamer. A multicolored light gushed out, shooting up to the sky. It was resplendent and colorful. In the sky, the pitch-black clouds scattered, and light shone on Bu Fang's body, making Bu Fang's entire body shine with a golden light. The steam buns are done. The audience became quiet, and no one dared to breathe loudly. Since the result was about to be announced, everyone was a little nervous. Would Bu Fang become the Heaven Chief? Or would he be beaten back to his original state, beaten like a dead dog by the Tong family's young master, and brought back? Everyone's eyes widened. Everything was decided by the 5 steamed buns in the steamer. However, the audience sucked in a breath of cold air. Everyone's eyes froze for a long time before they finally let out a long sigh. In the next instant, the audience was in an uproar. I knew it. 3 days ago, he couldn't become the Heaven Chief, but 3 days later, he became the Heaven Chief. How could there be such an awesome person? The Heaven Chief is so noble. How could a mortal touch him? Trash mortal, you should just wash up and sleep. The audience couldn't help but laugh. They were so excited that they even started to dance. There was no immortal energy. The steamed buns in the steamer didn't have any immortal energy. This meant that Bu Fang had failed. His dish couldn't condense immortal energy, so he couldn't become the Heaven Chief. Bu Fang couldn't become the Heaven Chief. This meant that this arrogant mortal was going to suffer. Of course, some people felt that it was a pity. They thought that they would be able to witness a miracle. But Miracle was strangled by the throat and then completely crushed to pieces. In the end, the mortal couldn't become the Heaven Chief. Xin Yuan Shai craned her neck, staring at the 5 steam buns in the black turtle constellation walk. The steam buns were sparkling and translucent like jade, full of beauty. From time to time, they would emit a glazed luster. The inside of the steam buns seemed to be wrapped in light. However, those steam buns didn't have immortal energy. What a pity! Xin Yuan Xiaohui felt that it was a pity and let out a long sigh. Xin Yuan Xian stood beside Xin Yuan Xiaohui with a complicated look in his eyes. As expected, it's still not enough? He had thought that Bufang would succeed, but unfortunately, it seemed that he had failed. In the end, mortals were just mortals. Mu Luer furrowed her brows, and the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at Bufang, who was illuminated by the sunlight, and her heart wavered. Although the bun did not contain any immortal energy, Mu Luer could not see the slightest trace of worry on Bufang's face. That composure, it was as if he was mocking everyone's expressions. Administrator Chen's expression was solemn. He sat on the panel of judges. He was the only judge for the Heaven Chief assessment. That was because the rules for becoming the Heaven Chief were very simple. One had to attract tribulation lightning, and the dish had to condense immortal energy. In fact, the dishes that could help a chef become the Heaven Chief wouldn't taste bad. Tong Chung raised his foot and stomped on the ground. The jade stone that was rolling on the ground was immediately crushed by his foot. Trash! Let's see how you're going to fight with me. I want to see who dares to protect you. Tong Chung grinned coldly, his eyes filled with disdain. He had thought that Bufang would become the Heaven Chief and create trouble for him. It seemed he didn't need to prepare for this. If Bufang became the Heaven Chief, it would be troublesome. However, he seemed to have overestimated that mortal. He wasn't even the Heaven Chief. If Tong Chung wanted to kill Bufang, it would be as easy as killing an ant. Now, what do you have to say? Boom! Tong Chung stood up from his seat. Instantly, a terrifying aura burst out from his body. The void above his head seemed to twist. At this moment, Tong Cheng's true immortal realm cultivation base was displayed to the fullest. Everyone felt a little stifling, and they found it hard to breathe. His true immortal realm cultivation base was enough to suppress everyone. Tong Cheng's eyes were filled with murderous aura as he gazed at Bufang. His pressure seemed to turn into a small mountain, pressing down on Bufang. He wanted to see that mortal kneel in front of him and beg for mercy. These days, Tong Chung had been annoyed by a mortal, which made him very depressed. Today was the day he could vent his frustrations. He wanted to let that mortal experience the Tong family's 18 tortures. Manager Chen furrowed his brows and looked at Tong Chung. His mouth opened and closed, as if he wanted to say something. However, after thinking about it, he realized that it wasn't worth it to offend the Tong family's young master for a mortal chef who hadn't even condensed immortal energy. Thus, he swallowed the words he wanted to say. He had given up on Bufang. If he didn't become the Heaven Chief, he wouldn't even be qualified to compete with the aristocratic families. In the end, this mortal was still too young. Ha ha ha. When he sensed Manager Chen's hesitation, Tong Chung burst out laughing. Tong Chung burst out laughing. He was afraid that the immortal kitchen pavilion would fight with him for immortal. Although the Tong family wasn't afraid of the Heaven Chief Hall had the backing of the City Lord's mansion. If they started a fight, both sides would be unhappy. It wasn't necessary to fight for immortal. Now, it was the best outcome. Now, who else can help you? Tong Chung sneered. He leaped up, standing on the railing of the audience, looking down at Bufang. Bufang clasped his hands, his face still calm. Whitey stood by Bufang's side, its mechanical eyes flickering with light. After devouring the lightning punishment, Xiao Bai's fighting prowess had reached the 1-star true immortal realm. He wouldn't be weaker than Tong Chung. Of course, that wasn't what Bufang was relying on. Young Master Tong Chung, you're too impatient. You can't make a decision yet. Suddenly, A faint voice arose from the audience. The audience was bewildered. Tong Chung slightly furrowed his brows. In the distance, Mu Luer grinned. Young Pavilion Master Mu, you're not the Heaven Chief, so you don't know the Heaven Chief's rules. If a dish doesn't have immortal energy, it's not the Heaven Chief's dish. Isn't it obvious? Does the Heaven Chief Hall really want to fight with the Tong family to the end? Tong Cheng's voice was cold and a little angry. Did the Heaven Chief Hall really want to become the Tong family's enemy for immortal? No, I'm just saying that it's too early to make a decision. How do you know this dish doesn't have immortal energy? Mu Luer asked with a smile. She glanced at Bu Fong, who seemed to be emitting a golden light under the sunlight. She felt an inexplicable sense of confidence. Do you think we're all blind? Tong Chung shook his head, sneering. You're all blind. All of a sudden, a cold voice arose. Everybody was dumbstruck. The audience, Tong Chung, and even Manager Chun, they stiffly turned their necks to look at Bu Fong. Under the warm sunlight, Bu Fong lazily squinted. He slowly rolled down his sleeves, waving them. Then his mind flickered. The 5 steamed buns, which looked as though they were hugging glass, flew out and landed on the blue and white porcelain plate that Bu Fong had prepared. The plate was round, and the buns were decorated with green spear ingredients. They looked as though they were shrouded in mist. What did you say? Tong Chung coldly looked at Bu Fong. His aura became more terrifying and thick. The entire room seemed to shake. Bu Fong was expressionless. He glanced at Tong Chung as though he was looking at an idiot. I said you're blind. As soon as Bu Fong said that, he clasped his hands, holding the steamed buns as he slowly walked away. Shortly after, he arrived in front of Manager Chun, who was sitting on the judge's seat. Manager Chun was bewildered as he looked at the calm young man. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. None of the 5 steamed buns had immortal energy. Where did this mortal get his courage and confidence from? Wait a minute. Manager Chun stared at the steamed buns. Suddenly, his eyes shrank as though he remembered something. He couldn't believe it. Could it be? In the distance, Xianyuan Xiaohui seemed to have remembered something that he had missed out on, and his eyes instantly lit up. Oh, it's like that. Honorbu's confidence comes from. TSK, TSK, TSK. Xianyuan Xian was bewildered. What's going on? What's the reason? Tell me. Didn't you say that Bu Fong didn't have any hope? Why are you so excited now? Could immortal energy appear out of thin air? However, in the next moment, Xianyuan Xian was dumbstruck. Not only Xianyuan Xian, but the entire audience also looked at the center of the room, gazing at the young man under the sunlight. A golden kitchen knife appeared in the young man's hand. He swung it casually. The kitchen knife was like a shooting star as it slashed down. One of the steamed buns, which seemed to be wrapped in glass, was cut open. Swish, under everyone's gazes, clear spring water seemed to gush out of the steamed bun. An aroma that seemed to have materialized rose from the steamed bun. A milky white gas came out of the cut on the steamed bun. It slowly rose, hovering around the steamed bun. That milky white gas. It was immortal energy. The aroma diffused. In just a blink of an eye, it filled the entire room. It drilled into everyone's nostrils, causing their faces to involuntarily reveal a sunken expression. This aroma, how could it be so thick? Gulp, everyone swallowed their saliva. They couldn't believe their eyes as they looked at the swirling immortal energy and the aroma. How could a steamed bun smell so good? The skin on Manager Chen's face trembled. Indeed, it was like that. This steamed bun had a hidden meaning. Manager Chen looked at Bu Fong with a complicated expression. Then he sat back on his seat. The steamed bun that Bu Fong had cut open was still flowing with clear spring water. The clear soup was steaming hot, emitting a fragrant aroma. The steamed bun seemed to have a glass-like luster. Crystal glazed soup steamed bun. Please have a taste. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun in Bu Fong's hand. After twirling the knife, it turned into a golden gas and dispersed. Soup steamed bun. Manager Chun took a deep breath. What entered his nose was the thick aroma of the soup steamed bun. This aroma was the aroma of meat, but it also had the fragrance of grains. The meat aroma was condensed like a hemp rope that was rolled up by different ropes, binding one's mind and making one sink. The fragrance of the grains was refreshing. Smelling it, one's soul seemed to be cleansed. When Tong Chung saw the immortal energy, his pupils shrank. That mortal! He could cook a dish with immortal energy. Damn it! Tong Cheng's heart was filled with resentment. His eyes were bloodshot. His chest heaved up and down. He was so angry that he was about to go crazy. How could that mortal cook a dish with immortal energy? At this moment, everyone's attention wasn't on Tong Chung. It was on Manager Chun. Manager Chun picked up a pair of jade chopsticks. He used them to pick up the soup steam bun, which was still gushing with thick soup. He took a deep breath. Stroking his beard, he stuck out his mouth and bit the soup steam bun. The moment he bit the soup-steamed bun, Manager Chen's eyes widened. Chapter 977. Manager Chen used a pair of jade chopsticks to pick up the soup bun. His mouth moved forward, blocking the opening of the soup bun that Bu Fong had cut open. In the next instant, Manager Chen's eyes widened, as though they were about to jump out of their sockets. The shock on his face caused everyone in the room to fall silent. Boiling hot. It was as hot as volcanic rock. The soup that was like a clear spring flowed through the opening of the soup bun, rushing into his mouth. In just a short while, it filled his mouth. That boiling hot feeling was like a scorching volcanic rock, making Manager Chun feel as though his face was being roasted red. The scorching feeling made his breathing stop. Gulp. However, he couldn't control himself. He gulped down a mouthful of saliva. Instantly, the soup entered his mouth, flowing along his throat and into his stomach. That burning feeling traveled down his throat, and his entire stomach felt as though it was about to explode. Logically speaking, this kind of feeling shouldn't be good. However, Manager Chun felt a wave of satisfaction. That's right, it was satisfaction. After the boiling hot feeling, what burst out on his taste buds was a wave of extremely fragrant taste. This smell caused Manager Chun to involuntarily narrow his eyes. Even his beard was trembling. The fragrance lingered above the soup bun. Sniffing the fragrance, Manager Chen's mouth began to chew continuously. The skin of the bun was filled with elasticity. It was also incomparably soft. The remaining air within the bun skin gushed out with a chi-chi sound as it was bitten down. It charged against the walls of the mouth, bringing about a different kind of experience and sensation. This soup bun skin, Manager Chun was bewildered. Thinking about the kneading method that Bu Fong had used before, his eyes instantly became solemn. That violent kneading method caused even him to be extremely astonished. Was this the effect of the violent kneading method? The soup bun skin that was kneaded was soft and elastic. Moreover, the holes in the soup bun skin hid the true energy that the kneader had shot out. When it entered his mouth, he felt as though the true energy had exploded in his mouth. However, that kind of explosive feeling wasn't intense, and it wouldn't make him feel uncomfortable. Just the right amount of gentleness was the most wonderful taste. The most worth mentioning was the soup bun filling. 5 types of spirit beast meat were minced into meat stuffing, and there was even a type of immortal ingredient among them. Manager Chun thought of the 8 treasures chicken. Even though the 8 treasures chicken wasn't a fully matured immortal ingredient that contained immortal energy, it was still of a higher grade than ordinary ingredients, even though it was still underage. On top of that, there was a lot of spirit beast meat. Some flew in the sky, some swam in the sea, and some ran on land. The different flavors of the spirit beast meat blended together to form a unique texture and taste that could completely captivate one. Slurp, slurp. Manager Chen narrowed his eyes, feeling the immortal energy hovering above the bun. He grabbed the bun and put it into his mouth. When he bit down, the color of colored glaze blossomed and flashed. A soup bun went down his stomach. Manager Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He lifted his head in disbelief and looked at Bu Fong. When he saw Bu Fong, he was also dumbfounded. Why were Administrator Chen's eyes so passionate? This colored glaze soup bun actually made Manager Chun feel the true energy in his body start to boil restlessly. The spirit sea in his head seemed to be surging. His cultivation base had increased by a small arc, and this increase did not seem to be temporary. Your bun. Manager Chin sucked in a breath of cold air. A soup bun that could increase one's cultivation base? The Heaven Chief Hall was in charge of many chefs' assessments in Immortal City, so it had met countless chefs. However, it was rare to see a dish with a function. That was because such a dish could only be found by chance. Even in Immortal City, it was extremely precious. Generally speaking, the recipes of such dishes were in the hands of aristocratic families, and they were considered precious treasures. Hence, dishes with a function were extremely precious. This soup bun in front of him, it was obviously cooked by a mortal. However, it could permanently increase one's cultivation base without any side effects. This was an unbelievable effect. Manager Chen's eyes shone brightly. This mortal was not ordinary. Grabbing another bun, Manager Chen didn't care about what was happening outside the window. He only focused on eating the soup bun. He stuffed the bun into his mouth. The entire bun was stuffed into his mouth. His teeth clenched. Chomp! It was as though something had broken. Manager Chen's entire body began to twitch. His eyes were bloodshot, and his entire face instantly flushed red. The soup bun was stuffed into his mouth. As he bit down, the boiling soup shot out. It wasn't like a clear spring, but more like a waterfall rushing into his mouth. His entire body seemed to have been electrocuted, as though it had been cleansed. There was only one word to describe it. Awesome. The audience watched as Manager Chen ate a soup bun and started to eat the second one. Everyone's face became extremely strange. Manager Chen was a person of virtue and prestige in the Heaven Chief Hall. He was sent by the City Lord Mansion to the Heaven Chief Hall to be in charge of the Heaven Chief's assessment. Naturally, his status wasn't ordinary. Although he wasn't the Heaven Chief, he had eaten countless Heaven Chief's dishes. It was impossible for him to look like he was so hungry that he couldn't be choosy. Could it be that the soup bun was really that delicious? Smelling the fragrance in the air, the audience couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Perhaps it was really delicious. All of a sudden, the audience was startled, because they had almost missed another fact. That mortal, did he really become the Heaven Chief? 5 buns. Could it be that all 5 of them have immortal energy? It seems to be very powerful. These buns seem to be delicious. The audience lost their confidence and started whispering to each other. They no longer had the sarcasm from before. Manager Chen's table manners had already explained everything. At this moment, Bufong had already been confirmed as the Heaven Chief, a highly revered Heaven Chief. A mortal, in just 3 days, had transformed from a special grade chef to a Heaven Chief. This was really a miracle. The 4th, the 5th, 5 soup buns, all falling into Manager Chen's mouth. After eating all 5 buns, Manager Chen stuck out his tongue, stroked his beard, and smacked his lips. Then, he let out a long breath. Delicious. Delicious. Congratulations. You've become the Heaven Chief. Manager Chen stood up, praising. His eyes were filled with passion as he looked at Bufong. Swoosh. At this moment, the audience was boiling. He had really become the Heaven Chief. Xian Yuan Xiaoe looked at Bufong, who was bathed in the sunlight. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, revealing a smile. Xian Yuan Xian was still in a daze. Bufong, who was looked down upon by everyone, had actually become the Heaven Chief in such a domineering manner. In just 3 days, he had slapped everyone's faces. Xian Yuan Xian still remembered the first time she met Bufong, that country bumpkin now. He had actually become the Heaven Chief. Xian Yuan Xiaoe saw her younger sister in a daze, and the corners of her mouth rose. She raised her hand, patting Xian Yuan Xian's head. Little girl, do you still remember what I taught you? If you want to woo the Heaven Chief, you have to start from a young age. Although it's too late for you now, it doesn't matter. I believe in your ability. Xian Yuan Xiaohui grinned. Xian Yuan Xian was bewildered. A moment later, she understood what her brother meant. Her face flushed red. She coyly twisted her body, saying coquettishly, Brother, what are you talking about? I don't want to talk to you anymore. After saying this, Xin Yuan Xian's long eyelashes fluttered. She raised her head and looked at the expressionless, calm young man in the middle of the square. There seemed to be a ripple in her eyes. He seemed a little handsome. Mu Luer clasped her hands. The corners of her mouth rose as she looked at Bu Fong, nodding. That mortal didn't let her down. What everyone thought was impossible had been done by him. He had slapped everyone's faces. That mortal seemed to be born to slap people's faces. Ever since she had met him, how many people had he slapped? Tong Cheng's chest heaved up and down. He stood on the railing, coldly looking at Bu Fong. The audience looked at him as if they were watching a joke. Some of the disciples from the aristocratic families around them even sneered. Tong Cheng understood that he would become the laughingstock of the aristocratic families in a mortal city after today's event. Being slapped by a mortal. Except for him, no one else could do that. However, Tong Cheng quickly calmed down. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Looking at Bu Fong on the stage, a mocking look flashed in his eyes. Even if you become the Heaven Chief, so what? A mortal is just a mortal. Boom. A moment later, Tong Cheng's aura burst out. Then, from the auditorium, streams of aura soared into the sky. At this moment, the auras of 3 true immortal realm experts filled the entire room. The audience was dumbstruck. They were so frightened by this pressure that they didn't dare to breathe. At this moment, they realized that things weren't over yet. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the crowd, 2 figures appeared next to Tong Cheng as if they had teleported. They stood next to Tong Cheng, standing on a railing. 3 true God Realm auras were emitted from their bodies. Tong Cheng was at the true immortal realm, together with 2 other true immortal realm experts. The pressure from 3 true immortal realm experts was really intimidating. At this moment, Manager Chen's expression changed. Tong Cheng, what are you doing? This is the Heaven Chief Hall. It's not a place where you can act presumptuously. Manager Chen shouted angrily. 3 true immortal realm experts. Did the Tong family want to start a war with the Heaven Chief Hall? Did Tong Cheng want to shed all pretense of cordiality with the City Lord Mansion? The aristocratic family's youngsters around sucked in breaths of cold air, admiring Tong Cheng's generosity. For mortal, Tong Cheng really worried a lot. The auras of the 3 true immortal realm experts burst out at the same time. The entire room seemed to shake. Manager Chun, I don't want to go against the Heaven Chief Hall. I just want to take this mortal who has offended me away. Tong Cheng said faintly, emphasizing the word mortal. He wanted to tell Manager Chun that it wasn't worth it to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Tong family, one of the 4 great families for a mortal. Manager Chun, you said that as long as this mortal completes the Heaven Chief's assessment, the Heaven Chief Hall won't care about his life or death. The mortal and I will settle our grudges. Do you want to go back on your word? Tong Cheng said. His aura became fiercer and fiercer, and it was extremely terrifying. People could see a surging spirit sea above Tong Cheng's head. A golden figure was sitting cross-legged on the spirit sea, which looked exactly like Tong Cheng. It was Tong Cheng's origin soul, the reason why a true immortal realm expert could subdue a divine realm expert. Manager Chen's face froze when he heard Tong Cheng's words. That's right. He did say that. However, at that time, he hadn't recognized Bu Fong's potential. Bu Fong was able to cook functional dishes, so his potential was already infinitely high in Manager Chen's heart. If he could be recruited into the City Lord's mansion, he could even give the City Lord's mansion a chance to turn the tables in this relic exploration. Thus, he had to protect this mortal. Lifting his head to look at Mu Luer in the distance, Manager Chen saw the solemn look in her eyes. Manager Chen's heart shivered. He understood the young pavilion master's decision. A moment later, he was about to open his mouth. However, just as he was about to open his mouth, Bu Fong, who had been silent all this time, finally moved. Bu Fong clasped his hands, slowly lifting his head to look at Tong Cheng's group of 3. Facing the 3 true immortal realm experts, his face didn't change. His eyes fell on Tong Chung, who was sneering. Bu Fong's face was expressionless as he spoke indifferently. Do you want to be smashed by the walk? Chapter 978. Do you want to be hit by the walk again? Bu Fong's faint voice echoed around the area. Everybody was bewildered when they heard him. They gawked and dropped their jaws, looking at Bu Fong. What did that mortal say? Tong Cheng's aura stagnated. When he heard Bu Fong's words, he almost vomited a mouthful of blood. He had been hit twice by Bu Fong's black turtle constellation walk, which had caused his nose to bleed. It was a pain in his heart that he would never forget. At this moment, Bu Fong had opened the wound in his heart. You should die. Tong Chung was so angry that his eyes were bloodshot. He hated that mortal to the extreme. He hated that he couldn't capture that mortal and use the Tong family's torture methods to torture him. Manager Chun, if you stop me, I won't hesitate even if I have to start a war with the City Lord Palace. That mortal must die. Tong Chung enunciated each and every word clearly. A moment later, the two true immortal realm experts standing next to Tong Chung moved. Boom! The railing was smashed. The two true immortal realm experts appeared in front of Bu Fong as if they had teleported there. Their faces were cold and emotionless, but the energy in their bodies was so terrifying. Their true energy seemed to be able to break the illusionary void, and their mental energy was like a vast sea. Tong Cheng's aura expanded. He didn't take action. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but he was afraid of being hit by the walk. He wanted to wait for a while before taking action. Manager Chin's eyes shrank when he saw the two of them take action. A moment later, his body flashed and disappeared, appearing in front of Bu Fong. Bu Fong is the friend of the Heaven Chief Hall's young pavilion master. I must ensure his safety. If young Master Tong wants to take action, I will accompany you. Boom! Manager Chin's cultivation base was one-star true immortal realm, and the two true immortal realm experts of the Tong family were also one-star true immortal realm experts. However, there were two of them. Manager Chin's face slightly changed under the pressure of the other party's aura. He pulled out his arm and smashed it forward. The sound of the air shattering rang out, as though the void was about to be torn apart. His palms instantly clashed with the two true God stage experts. Manager Chin's body trembled. His face turned slightly red, and he took a few steps back. The two true God realm experts' faces changed. With a flip of their bodies, they retreated. Why did this old man's cultivation become stronger? How could he resist the two of them? The two true God realm experts of the Tong family frowned. Tong Cheng's pupils shrank. Old man, you're really courting death. Since that's the case, there's no need to show mercy. Kill them all, Tong Chung said coldly. The next moment, the eyes of the two true God realm experts of the Tong family instantly turned cold. His figure dashed forward once more. His terrifying true energy seemed to have transformed into waves that surged throughout the entire room. Many people present felt a pressure on their chests. Fear appeared in the eyes of the audience. This was the power of an aristocratic family, the prestige of a true God realm expert. Bu Fong clasped his hands. His vermilion robe fluttered unceasingly under the pressure of those experts. However, his face didn't change at all. Xiao stood behind him. Starlight and lightning flashed in his mechanical eyes. Boom, boom, boom. They continued to exchange several blows. Manager Chen retreated unceasingly. The room seemed to be unable to bear the pressure, and it started to shake. It seemed like it was about to shatter. In the crowd, Mu Lunar's eyes turned solemn. The Tong family. Did they really want to stir up trouble? Buzz, all of a sudden, in the immortal kitchen pavilion, a powerful and terrifying aura burst out. The faces of the two true God realm experts of the Tong family instantly changed, and they stopped what they were doing. They were two-star true God realm experts. It seemed the Tong family's actions had disturbed the two-star true God realm experts guarding the Heaven Chief Hall. However, Tong Chung didn't care. He seemed to have prepared for this. Today, he wanted to kill Bu Fong no matter what. If you don't want the conflict to escalate into a conflict between the Tong family and the City Lord's mansion, please watch quietly. Otherwise, I don't mind taking action. Deafening voice echoed from outside the Heaven Chief Hall. The aura of a 2-star true God realm expert burst out, suppressing the aura in the Heaven Chief Hall. Two terrifying auras and mental powers seemed to collide formlessly in the void. In the next instant, the true immortal realm expert in the immortal kitchen pavilion coldly snorted in anger. Then he calmed down, and the aura outside the Heaven Chief Hall also retracted. The other's appearance seemed to be to intimidate them. Mu Luer's complexion changed, becoming extremely pale in an instant. Tong Chung had really prepared well. Tong Chung grinned. It seemed that today's matter was a success. That mortal couldn't escape this calamity. Third uncle, thank you for taking action. Tong Chung grinned, respectfully bowing in a direction outside the Heaven Chief Hall. Then he turned his head, coldly gazing at Bufong. Go. Tong Cheng's aura surged as he jumped down from the railing. The audience sighed. They knew that Bufong couldn't escape this time. The 2-star true God realm expert in the Heaven Chief Hall had retreated, which meant that he had tacitly approved Tong Cheng's actions. Without the protection of the Heaven Chief Hall, Bufong was just a mortal. How could he be the Tong family's opponent? Swoosh! The 3 true God realm experts' auras pressed down. Their mental energy fluctuations dispersed in an instant. The walls of the Heaven Chief Hall's examination room cracked. The audience's faces changed. They all rushed out of the Heaven Chief Hall's examination room. In just a short while, the room had become a battlefield. Although Manager Chun had eaten the soup dumplings to increase his cultivation base, he hadn't broken through yet. Facing the 3 true God realm experts, he wasn't strong enough. His face changed, and he spurted a mouthful of blood as he was blown backward. However, Tong Chung didn't want to kill him. No matter what, Manager Chun was an important figure in the Heaven Chief Hall. If he killed him, the City Lord's mansion wouldn't let him off easily. That would be a complete fallout. Anyway, it was enough to defeat Manager Chun. The 2 true God realm experts dashed forward. Their terrifying auras stirred the wind and clouds as they dashed toward Bufong. With each step they took, the walls around them shattered, sending rocks everywhere. Tong Chung followed behind the 2 true God realm experts to avoid being hit by Bufong's black turtle constellation walk. That walk was poisonous. He had to be careful. The audience widened their eyes as they looked at Bufong. They thought that Bufong wouldn't be able to escape this calamity. After all, Bufong's cultivation base was just at the peak of divine spirit realm. How could he be a match for them? Let alone 3 true God realm experts. Even one of them wouldn't be able to resist. Although they had the experience of smashing Tong Chung with a wok, they still thought that it was luck. Sizzle, sizzle. Lightning arcs shot out. Xiao Bai's body suddenly appeared in front of Bufong. The metal wings on his back spread open, and the clanging sounds echoed unceasingly. Sharp energy scattered everywhere. Boom, boom. Xiao Bai's fan-like fist collided with the 2 true God realm experts of the Tong family. Sizzle. Lightning arcs shot out from his fist. Boom. Xiao Bai's body was as still as a mountain. The 2 true God realm experts retreated. Tong Chung also raised his fist, hitting Xiao Bai's abdomen. A moment later, Tong Cheng's face changed. He felt a suction force coming from the Earth Immortal Puppet's abdomen. His eyes were hot as he gazed at the Earth Immortal Puppet. You're safe and sound after taking my punch. This Earth Immortal Puppet is mine. Tong Chung was so excited that he screamed. Boom! However, Tong Chung didn't dare to gamble. He retracted his fist and retreated. Xiao Bai's aura expanded unceasingly. Unexpectedly, his fighting capacity had reached the true God realm. He pulled out the war God stick from his abdomen. Holding it with one hand, he swung it horizontally. Lightning arcs rolled. In just a blink of an eye, he dashed out. The 2 true God realm experts and Xiao Bai began to fight. The 2 true God realm experts also took out their weapons, which were 2 identical spears. As they brandished them, a terrifying sharpness shot out. It caused the surrounding ground to be filled with potholes. At this moment, the entire room collapsed. The walls collapsed. The onlookers were watching the battle from a distance. When they saw Xiao Bai fight two experts at the same time, they took in a breath of cold air. This Earth Immortal puppet wasn't ordinary at all. Tong Chung stood in the distance. The blazing light in his eyes became thicker. His strongest Earth Immortal puppet was at the peak of the divine spirit realm. In front of a true God realm expert, it was just an ant. However, this mortal's Earth Immortal puppet could resist two true God realm experts. Several days ago, when he fought with this Earth Immortal puppet, it wasn't that strong. Was it because it had eaten lightning? This Earth Immortal puppet could eat lightning to evolve? Oh my God, an Earth Immortal puppet that could evolve. It was unbelievable. Although Xiao Bai was being suppressed, he didn't show any signs of defeat. Tong Chung rubbed his chest in disbelief, as if he wanted to calm down. He looked at Bu Fong in the distance. His eyes focused as he sneered. No Manager Chun, no Earth Immortal puppet. How could this mortal stop him? Buzz, with a shake of his hand, a scarlet kitchen knife appeared in his hand. It was his immortal kitchen knife, the one he got from the fruit on the Heaven Tree. The head of the Tong family had given it to him when he became the Heaven Chief. With this immortal kitchen knife, he was sure he could crush this mortal. The kitchen knife spun. Instantly, scarlet knife energy filled the entire room. Many people sucked in breaths of cold air as they focused on Tong Cheng's hand. The scarlet immortal kitchen knife in his hand attracted everyone's attention. The room was filled with an uproar. Immortal tool? To deal with immortal. Tong Chung even took out his immortal tool. Bu Fong clasped his hands. His eyes couldn't help but move as he looked at the scarlet kitchen knife in Tong Cheng's hand. All of a sudden, his mind flickered and the golden dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Facing that immortal tool, Bu Fong seemed to feel the disdain from the dragon bone kitchen knife spirit. Disdain, Bu Fong arched his brows. This was getting interesting. Boom! Tong Cheng moved. He stomped his foot, his body leaving afterimages as he appeared in front of Bu Fong. He held the scarlet kitchen knife horizontally, slashing at Bu Fong's head. Damn mortal, it's time for you to pay the price. The scarlet kitchen knife emitted invisible knife energy. The entire floor of the Heaven Chief Hall couldn't bear the knife energy, shattering it. The audience held their breaths, looking at the mortal with pity. He had just become the Heaven Chief, and now he was going to be killed. It was really bad luck. He had just reached the peak of his life, and now he was going to fall to the bottom. It was really tragic. However, to everyone's surprise, Bu Fong's face didn't change. However, this time, Bu Fong raised the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. Of course, in his other hand, the pitch-black turtle constellation Wok also appeared, and he held it in his hand. He held the knife in his left hand and the Wok in his right. The black turtle constellation Wok emitted an earthen yellow halo. Bu Fong indifferently looked at Tong Chung. In his spirit sea, a dragon roared and roared, surging violently. His mental force had reached the peak that Bu Fong could release, turning into ripples that spread out. Buzz, facing the mental force that could be compared to a 2-star true immortal realm expert, Tong Cheng's slashing motion halted. He looked absent-minded. When his absent-mindedness disappeared, his pupils constricted at once. The first thing he saw was the overlapping shadows of 13 golden kitchen knives. Eventually, they turned into a knife, slashing at him. Chapter 979. The onlookers felt as though they were about to suffocate. Their eyes widened as they looked at the distance. Tong Cheng's blade was slashing down as though he wanted to cut Bu Fong in half. They could already imagine the scene of blood splashing. Some people couldn't bear to watch it, so they closed their eyes. Mu Luder sighed. In the end, the Heaven Chief Hall had given up on Bu Fong. Although Manager Chun was at the true immortal realm, he was alone. To deal with Bu Fong, Tong Chung had brought 2 true immortal realm experts from his family. How could Manager Chun resist them? What surprised her was that Bu Fong's Earth Immortal puppet could resist the 2 of them. However, what was the use of blocking the two of them? Tong Cheng's power was much stronger than Bufong's. If Bufong faced Tong Cheng, he would be crushed. The scarlet blade light filled people's eyes, which was so dazzling. It was the light of an immortal tool. It was an immortal tool. It was a spiritual cooking tool that grew on the heaven tree in the heaven chief realm. Its power was unparalleled, and it had a tool spirit. If a chef could communicate with a tool spirit, his cooking skills would reach a higher level. Ordinary people couldn't see an immortal tool for their whole lives because the Heaven Chief Realm's immortal tools were monopolized by the aristocratic families. And today, they saw an immortal tool with their own eyes. How could Bufong resist it? The first time, Bufong could attack Tong Cheng when he wasn't paying attention. This time, he wouldn't have a chance to turn the tables. After all, Tong Cheng had taken out his immortal tool. The scarlet light became more dazzling. Everybody couldn't help but cover their eyes. Some people were so shocked by the dazzling light that they wanted to cry. Boom! A loud explosion echoed. A terrifying explosion occurred in the middle of the room. Smoke and dust billowed, covering everything. "It's over!" Xianyuan Xiaohui and Xianyuan Xian stood in the ruins and looked at the billowing smoke and dust. She couldn't help but sigh. Xianyuan Xian stood beside Xianyuan Xiaohui with a sorrowful look on her face. She tugged at the corner of Xianyuan Xiaohui's clothes with a hint of sympathy in her eyes. The Heaven Chief Realm is really ruled by the aristocratic families. Mortals really have no status at all. Xianyuan Xian murmured in low spirits. The aristocratic families have absolute control over the Heaven Chief Realm. The City Lord's mansion is actually also an aristocratic family. Xianyuan Xiaohui touched Xianyuan Xian's head and sighed. Mu Luer's gaze was complicated. She had done so much, but in the end, she was still unable to protect Bufong. This somewhat miraculous mortal chef was dead after all. This was the consequence of offending an aristocratic family. Looking at the ruins, the audience fell silent. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes shrank. When they looked over, they were shocked to discover that two figures had appeared in the smoke. Two figures? How could there be two figures? According to common sense, it should be normal to see 1.5 figures. That mortal should have been cut in half by Tong Cheng's immortal tool, leaving only half of his body. Swish, a gust of wind blew over, blowing away the smoke and dust. As the wind blew, the audience felt a stinging pain on their faces. It was the blade energy wrapped in the wind. That blade energy was really sharp. The audience couldn't help but sigh in admiration. It was worthy of being an immortal tool. Xianyuan Xiaohui raised her hand, and a wisp of true energy surged out, blocking the blade energy and preventing it from hurting Xianyuan Xian. However, a wisp of blade energy still managed to get in, cutting off a strand of Xianyuan Xian's hair. No, this blade energy isn't Tong Cheng's immortal tool's blade energy. Xianyuan Xiaohui's eyes shrank. Then, she exclaimed in admiration. Xianyuan Xian was bewildered. In the distance, Mu Luer was also bewildered. A moment later, she looked at the scene. Boom! The smoke and dust dispersed, revealing the scene in the square. As soon as the scene appeared, everybody was dumbstruck. Tong Cheng was bewildered as he looked at the wound on his face. That wound was as thin as a thread, and faint beads of blood oozed from it. However, that wasn't what he was concerned about. His eyes were glued to the area in front of him. There, the golden splendor pierced his eyes. That golden splendor was golden and resplendent, golden and dazzling. Jin's voice made his body shiver slightly. Crack, a clear and melodious sound rang out. Then, the audience sucked in breaths of cold air as they saw something they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The immortal knife in Tong Cheng's hand slowly broke into 2 halves, falling to the ground with a clear, clanging sound. His immortal tool was broken. How could it be? An aristocratic family's youngster screamed in disbelief, goosebumps rising on his skin. The others were dumbstruck. Bufong's face was emotionless. He shook the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife suddenly spun in his hand, and after twirling it, Bufong raised the black turtle constellation wok in his other hand. Boom! The black wok zoomed in on Tong Cheng's face. The moment Bufong wielded the black turtle constellation wok, Tong Cheng pulled himself together. However, he could only see the familiar black wok zooming in on him. It's that F*King black wok again. Boom! This time, Bufong didn't show mercy. He gathered all of his energy and smashed the wok. Then, he ruthlessly pounded on Tong Cheng's face. Tong Cheng fell backward. Blood spurted from his nose, and it looked as if his nose was about to collapse. Boom! Tong Cheng fell to the ground, howling miserably as he covered his nose. Bufong slowly walked toward Tong Cheng. Bufong raised the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand and infused it with his true energy. A dragon roar reverberated in the sky. A moment later, the dragon bone kitchen knife in Bufong's hand enlarged, turning into a giant machete. A golden divine dragon phantom hovered above the knife. Then it enlarged, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. When the onlookers saw the divine dragon phantom, they were shaken. That mortal, he also has an immortal tool? Did that golden kitchen knife cut young Master Tong Cheng's immortal tool? His immortal tool is broken. Cold sweat beaded on their foreheads. This mortal had brought them too many surprises. Was he really immortal? Were all mortals nowadays so awesome? That golden kitchen knife, what level of immortal tool was it? Actually, immortal tools had different levels. However, they didn't know their specific levels. Only the aristocratic families knew about them. Just like the names of the dishes in the Heaven Chief's recipe, ordinary people didn't have access to them. Bufong's eyes were indifferent. He shouldered the dragon bone kitchen knife. In the distance, the two true immortal realm experts of the Tong family were fighting against Xiaobai. They had seen the battle. They had never thought that young Master Tong Cheng, who was supposed to crush his opponent, would get his nose broken and fall to the ground. Damn it! One of the true immortal realm experts thundered. His spear turned into thousands of shadows, filling the sky with spear shadows. He wanted to force Xiaobai to retreat and save Tong Cheng. However, the flashing lightning arcs and the war god stick that looked like a soldering iron suddenly appeared in front of him. It swept across, and tens of thousands of stick shadows appeared, sending his lance flying away. Lightning exploded. The true immortal realm expert was sent flying, coughing blood. The other true immortal realm expert hurried to stop Xiaobai. The situation seemed to have changed dramatically in just a blink of an eye. What do you want to do? Tong Cheng felt that the sunlight on his face was blocked. He covered his bleeding nose and struggled to open his eyes. He saw the figure looking at him from above. Damn mortal! Tong Cheng's eyes were bloodshot as he roared. A gust of wind blew, and the velvet rope that tied Bufong's hair snapped. His hair fluttered in the wind. Bufong looked down at Tong Cheng, the corners of his mouth twitching. A moment later, his shoulder shook, and the dragon bone kitchen knife on his shoulder slashed at Tong Cheng. The onlookers were frightened. They felt their hair stand on end, and their hair stood on end. That mortal! He dared to kill Tong Cheng. He was the genius of the Immortal City's top aristocratic family, the Heaven Chief. The might of the dragon bone kitchen knife was extremely terrifying. It seemed as though the air itself was being torn apart by the knife. Tong Cheng's entire body shivered. That kitchen knife, it could shatter his immortal tool. If it wanted to cut his head, wouldn't it be as easy as cutting tofu? You can't. Filthy animal. How dare you? Just as Bufong's dragon bone kitchen knife was about to slash Tong Cheng's head, a terrifying sound echoed in front of Bufong. A terrifying aura rushed over from outside the Heaven Chief Hall. In just a blink of an eye, it was close to Bufong. A long spear was hurled. With a swishing sound, it seemed to pierce through the void. With a tinkling sound, it stabbed Bufong's dragon bone kitchen knife. Bufong furrowed his brows as a huge force surged over. The dragon bone kitchen knife was smashed high into the air. The onlookers' tense hearts rose again. It was the two-star true immortal realm expert of the Tong family. However, what they saw next made them suck in a breath of cold air. Bufong didn't stop there. He raised the dragon bone kitchen knife and swung the black turtle constellation wok in a circle. Then, the black turtle constellation wok ruthlessly pounded on Tong Cheng's head. Tong Cheng looked at the black turtle constellation wok, which was getting bigger and bigger in front of him. His mind was shaken, and his entire body was shaking like a leaf. He cursed in his heart. He wanted to run away, but his heart was dominated by the terrifying black wok. He couldn't move at all. Boom! An ear-splitting sound rang out. The ground trembled as though it was an earthquake. The ground caved in, and fine cracks spread out like a spider web with Tong Cheng's head as the center. Tong Cheng's head was smashed into the ground, but his body didn't move. The onlookers seemed to hear something shattering. Tong Cheng's golden figure that had been floating above his spirit sea all this time started to crack. With 2 wok strikes, the one-star true immortal realm expert Tong Cheng's spirit sea was smashed. Tong Cheng felt as though a giant turtle, which seemed to be carrying a mountain that could support the sky and the sun, had poured into his spirit sea. In just a blink of an eye, his spirit sea exploded. Then he fainted. Boom! A terrifying aura approached in just a blink of an eye. Bufong furrowed his brows. He lifted his head to look at the fierce old man in front of him, who was glaring at him. The old man approached. His eyes bulged as he let out a long, ear-splitting roar. You! Damn it! Boom! He swung his palm, and a terrifying attack shot toward Bufong. A thick true energy beam hit Bufong in just a blink of an eye. The vermilion robe glowed with alternating red and white light. A moment later, it cracked and shattered. The invincibility of the vermilion robe was broken one more time. Bufong furrowed his brows. Gazing at the old man, he grabbed the black turtle constellation wok and swung it at him. The onlookers sucked in a breath of cold air. They looked as though they had just seen a ghost, that mortal chef. Facing a 2-star true immortal realm expert, his first choice wasn't to run. He actually wanted to beat him up. He wanted to ascend to the heavens. Chapter 980. The old man from the Tong family didn't expect that the mortal in front of him wouldn't run away when he made his move. Instead, the mortal picked up the black wok in his hand and smashed it at him. Where did he get his courage? The muscles on the old man's face trembled. His cultivation was at the 2-star true immortal realm, and his strength was incomparably powerful. His status was high. Why did this mortal dare to use his wok to counterattack under his pressure? You're courting death. That filthy animal doesn't know life from death. The old man from the Tong family roared. Tong Cheng was severely wounded by a mortal who hadn't even reached the true immortal realm. The black wok smashed down viciously. It was just 2 strikes, but it was enough to make people shiver. The old man tried to stop it, but he couldn't stop the mortal. This matter had become his humiliation. The old man thought that this humiliation could only be washed away with the mortal's blood. It was just a black wok. The old man thought that he could send it flying with just 1 slap. He wasn't Tong Cheng. Tong Cheng was just a 1-star true immortal realm expert. Moreover, he didn't cultivate much, so his fighting capacity was slightly weaker than an ordinary 1-star true immortal realm expert. The old man's cooking talent wasn't good, so he focused on cultivating. As a 2-star true immortal realm expert, how could he be defeated by a mortal? Although the old man was a little puzzled that his true chi did not kill this mortal, he was a little puzzled. However, he didn't have time to think about it. Bufong's face was emotionless. The bandage on his arm unraveled, revealing his Tao Tai arm. A bestial roar echoed from his arm. The roar was deafening, and the strength in Bufong's arms became stronger. He swung the black turtle constellation wok, which glowed with an earth-yellow halo. The sound of something tearing through the air arose. The old man's mouth turned cold. He raised his hand, turning it into a claw as he tried to grab the black turtle constellation wok. He wanted to crush the wok. The surrounding audience was already dumbfounded. Bufong was facing a 2-star true immortal realm expert, but he still chose to attack him. How could that mortal be so arrogant? How could he be so tough? He had smashed Tong Cheng half to death with 2 walk strikes. Facing a 2-star true immortal realm expert of the Tong family, he still wielded the Black Turtle Constellation Walk. This newly promoted Heaven Chief was unbelievably domineering. Xinyuan Xiaowei and the rest were already twitching their mouths. They were frightened by Bu Fong. Mu Luer furrowed her brows. The Tong family was too lawless. Do you really think there's no one in my Heaven Chief Hall? Mu Luer coldly snorted. In the next moment, a terrifying aura rose from the Heaven Chief Hall. It was a 2-star true immortal realm expert from the Heaven Chief Hall. Rumble. A terrifying pressure instantly spread across the entire area. An extremely resplendent ray of light shot out from a corner of the Heaven Chief Hall. Then, like a shooting star, it shot toward the Tong family's old man. Bu Fong stared at the old man indifferently. In his mind, there were raging waves in his spirit sea. The golden divine dragon swayed, and the black tortoise with the mountain on its back slowly floated. In the next instant, Bu Fong's extreme mental force suddenly spread out. It was like a burst of ripples rushing out. The Tong family's old man's claw froze in the air. Bu Fong's mental force surged over, making the old man somewhat dazed. Boom. A moment later, everyone's eyes shrank. Bu Fong's walk swung toward the old man's head. With a swishing sound, the air seemed to shatter. The old man's cultivation base was much higher than Tong Cheng's. In the true immortal realm, every increase in star would create a huge gap. The old man was dazed for just a moment. When he recovered, he felt his hair stand on end. All the hair on his body stood on end. His arms suddenly blocked the side of his head. Boom! The Black Turtle Constellation Walk smashed the old man's arms. A terrifyingly huge force burst forth from the Black Turtle Constellation Walk, causing the old man's body to be sent flying uncontrollably. With a loud boom, he landed in the ruins in the distance, stirring up a cloud of dust. At this moment, the air became extremely quiet. The audience was dumbstruck. No one dared to believe what they had just seen. That mortal chef really wanted to ascend to the heavens. With just 1 walk, he had sent the 2-star true immortal realm expert of the Tong family flying. That walk was invincible. Tong Cheng was hit twice by the walk, and no one knew if he was dead or alive. The Tong family's old man was also bewildered. Boom! Crushed stones scattered everywhere. The old man jumped up from the rubble. Veins bulged on his forehead, and his eyes bulged. His murderous aura spread everywhere. You filthy animal! The old man roared. However, since Bu Fong had stopped him, the Heaven Chief Hall's expert landed in front of the Tong family's old man. You said you wouldn't help. That's against the rules. Your Tong family really doesn't put the Heaven Chief Hall in your eyes. The Heaven Chief Hall's expert said coldly. You can't protect him. This mortal offended our Tong family. He won't have a good end. The elder from the Tong family said coldly. Facing the Heaven Chief Hall's expert, the old man knew he wouldn't have a chance to kill Bu Fong. This has nothing to do with protecting him. You said you wouldn't help him. The Heaven Chief Hall's expert said. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Boom, boom, boom. In the distance, the 2 Tong family's experts and Whitey struggled free from their grasp. He flew to Tong Cheng's side and pulled him up. Tong Cheng's body was almost embedded in the ground. However, when they saw Tong Cheng's appearance, they couldn't help but suck in breaths of cold air. Their minds couldn't help but shiver. Tong Cheng's head was almost deformed. Bu Fong hadn't shown any mercy with those 2 walk strikes. When the 2 Tong family's experts sensed Tong Cheng's aura, their hearts sank to the bottom of the valley. Tong Cheng's aura was continuously dispersing. His head was a bloody mess. His mental power was fading away at a rapid speed. Tong Cheng's spirit sea had exploded because of the Black Turtle Constellation Walk spirit. He was completely crippled. Everybody fell silent when they saw Tong Cheng's miserable state. He was the best example of courting death. He had always been courting death, but no one had ever surpassed him. In the end, he was beaten half to death. Those 2 walk strikes had shattered Tong Cheng's spirit sea. With his spirit sea shattered, Tong Cheng was crippled. He had lost his qualification to be the Heaven Chief. He might even become a fool. The onlookers sucked in breaths of cold air. It was too King tragic. They looked at Bu Fong with fear in their eyes. Tong Cheng's third uncle's eyes shivered. He was so sad. How could a good man be smashed half to death by a wok? Our Tong family's genius, the Heaven Chief, was crippled. How could I let this go? The old man of the Tong family's voice trembled as he gazed at the Heaven Chief, Hall's expert. The Heaven Chief Hall's expert was silent for a while, but he didn't say anything. In fact, Tong Chung deserved it. If Tong Chung hadn't used his status as a member of the Tong family to invade that mortal's Earth immortal puppet and attack that mortal, this wouldn't have happened. All of this had started with Tong Chung, so it should end with him as well. You guys take Tong Chung back to the Tong family. The old man of the Tong family's voice was heavy. Tong Cheng's spirit sea was shattered, which was a serious injury that couldn't be cured. With the Tong family's resources, it would be lucky if they could save his life. The two true God Realm experts looked at each other and nodded their heads. They took Tong Cheng's limp body and dashed out of the Heaven Chief Hall. No one stopped them. The three of them disappeared quickly. Bu Fong put away the Black Turtle Constellation wok and the Dragon Bone kitchen knife. His vermilion robe fluttered as he clasped his hands behind his back. Xiao Bai quietly stood behind Bu Fong, his mechanical eyes twinkling. The Heaven Chief's exam is over. If there's nothing else, I should go back and open my shop. Bu Fong said. Open a shop? How could he still be in the mood to open a shop? He had smashed the Tong family's young master into a retard, yet he still dared to go back leisurely. Wasn't he walking right into a trap? As one of the top aristocratic families, the Tong family would never allow someone who had challenged their prestige to continue living in this world. Even if Bu Fong had become the Heaven Chief, it wasn't impossible for an aristocratic family to kill a Heaven Chief. However, when people thought that Bu Fong would come back to seek the Heaven Chief Hall's protection, Bu Fong took his Earth Immortal puppet and slowly walked out of the room. He really left the Heaven Chief Hall. Mu Luer was dumbstruck. Xianyuan Xiaohui and Xianyuan Xian were also dumbstruck. Could it be that this mortal, wasn't he afraid of heaven or earth? Shouldn't he be running for his life now? Once he left the Heaven Chief Hall, he would lose the Heaven Chief Hall's protection. Who could he stop? He was simply courting death. The Tong family's old man coldly looked at Bu Fong's back as he left. A moment later, his face darkened as he flicked his sleeves and turned around. The two-star true immortal realm expert from the Heaven Chief Hall didn't stop him. His duty was to protect the Heaven Chief Hall. The life or death of the Heaven Chief had nothing to do with him. Moreover, since the Heaven Chief was courting death, he didn't need to stop him. The onlookers in the room stayed silent for a while. Then, they retreated and left the room. They dashed toward the outside of the Heaven Chief Hall. There was definitely a good show waiting to be played outside. Xianyuan Xiaohui sighed. He really didn't know where Bu Fong's confidence came from. Outside the Heaven Chief Hall, on the long street, Bu Fong clasped his hands as he strolled. Xiao Bai followed Bu Fong. A man and a puppet stepped on the street, and the crisp sound of their footsteps echoed, causing everyone to hold their breaths. Many people followed behind Bu Fong, waiting to see a good show. If Bu Fong could leave easily after crippling Tong Chung, the Tong family wouldn't be the Tong family anymore, and they wouldn't be qualified to be the top aristocratic family in the Immortal City. All of a sudden, Bu Fong halted his steps. A long spear fell from the sky, smashing hard on the ground in front of Bu Fong. Crushed stones scattered, and the wind howled. Bu Fong's hair fluttered unceasingly. The two-star true immortal realm expert of the Tong family descended from the sky. His aura locked onto Bu Fong. Since they weren't in the Heaven Chief Hall, the old man didn't hide his murderous aura. The surging killing intent caused the sky to turn a little gloomy. Everybody felt a tightness in their chests. An all-out attack from a two-star true immortal realm expert. It was really frightening. This mortal chef wouldn't be able to escape this calamity. The old man's face was cold, and his murderous aura burst forth. Above his head, a golden origin soul supported the sky, and a dazzling star shone in the sky. The old man's robe fluttered. His pressure was like a mountain pressing down, and the air became stagnant. You want to leave after injuring my Tong family? Mortal, you're really arrogant, the old man said coldly. In the next instant, a terrifying aura swept out. On the long street, there seemed to be a whirlwind. The pedestrians on the long street were scared out of their wits, and they all ran away. The crowd felt sorry for Bufong, and they sighed. The Tong family's old man didn't hide his murderous aura. After losing the protection of the Heaven Chief Hall, he didn't need to be afraid to kill Bufong. This unbridled, killing intent made Bufong furrow his brows. He raised his hand and rubbed his loose hair. Bufong gently exhaled. "Can't you just let me go back and do my business?" Bufong lightly said. In the next instant, he slightly raised his eyes and glanced at the Tong family's old man, who was pressing down with a supreme pressure. He calmly said, "Little Ha, 10 spicy strips. It's your turn, ha-ha." Bufong, young man, you should have made this wise decision long ago. Let the wise and mighty Lord Hades appear. Eyes closed, stripping finger, has been hungry for a long time. As soon as Bufong's voice fell, a burst of laughter rang out. Then, under the gazes of the crowd, a man wearing a long robe with his chest exposed suddenly appeared in front of Bufong. He raised his head and covered half of his face. The sound of laughter came out of his mouth. Bufong looked at Hades' era, then at the Tong family's old man, who was filled with killing intent. The corners of his mouth twitched. Clothes stripping? No, I'll just slap him to death. Chapter 981. Strip him? Slap him to death? When the people present heard Bufong's nonchalant words, they were a little bewildered. They stood rooted to the ground, looking at the calm Bufong, who had his hands clasped behind his back. Above his head, the old man from the Tong family surged down with immense pressure and power. His bony hand contained supreme might. The void seemed to distort under that palm. If that palm hit him, Bufong's fate wouldn't be any better than Tong Cheng's. His entire head would be smashed by the Tong family's old man. However, Bufong's calm face didn't show the slightest trace of anxiety in the face of death. When the old man heard Bufong's words, he was even more enraged. What did that mortal mean? Was he looking down on him? Hades' era looked at Bufong with interest. He didn't expect that Bufong would make such a request. Was it too much? Actually, it wasn't. For Hades' era, stripping someone's clothes was more difficult. It wasn't difficult for him to slap the two-marked divine, ethereal realm expert to death. However, stripping someone's clothes was more fun. Since Bufong Kid has asked so sincerely, I will reluctantly agree. Hades' era covered half of his face. His hair kept whipping in the air as though it wanted to shatter the void. The old man's face was cold. The unruly young man in front of him said that he wanted to slap him to death. He was even more arrogant than that mortal. What was going on in the immortal city recently? Why were there so many arrogant people? Shouldn't they be respectful toward the experts? Shouldn't they be more respectful toward the aristocratic families? You're courting death, the old man shouted angrily. His palm was as thin as a match, but it was filled with terrifying energy. Streams of true energy rumbled behind him, as if they were about to shatter the void. The source spirit opened its eyes, and starlight fell down. The ground seemed to be unable to bear the weight and collapsed, forming a huge palm print. The surrounding onlookers sucked in a breath of cold air once again. As expected of a two-star true immortal realm existence, his strength was indeed invincible. Whoosh! Hades' era raised his head in surprise. He watched as the palm, which was supposed to be aimed at Bufong, slapped towards him. He narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, the hand covering his face slowly loosened. A trace of indifference appeared on his unrestrained face. That's right, it was indifference. It was a coldness that made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Hades' era's eyes began to change. They slowly turned, and in the end, the whites of his eyes turned pitch black, and his pupils turned crimson. Pitch black nether energy slowly emerged around Hades' era's body. The nether energy swirled around Hades' era's body. In the end, it turned into a huge phantom image. Hades's phantom image stood proudly between the heavens and earth. Buzz, that cold and emotionless gaze made the Tong family's old man's heart tremble. What kind of monster is this? The old man sucked in a breath of cold air, and all the hairs on his body stood on end. What the hell was this pitch-black phantom image? Was it the youth's source spirit? What kind of person's source spirit would look like this? Crack, crack, the ground slowly cracked open. The old man's figure couldn't stop, and he charged towards the black phantom image. Bufang slowly took a step back. Hades' phantom image was very strong, and this wasn't the first time Bufang saw Hades make a move. In the immortal cooking realm, the Nether King's power could be unleashed even more unscrupulously. After all, Hades' power didn't seem to reach the limit of the Heaven Chief realm's heavenly path. Thus, it didn't matter if he used his full strength. Hades' eyes widened, and his scarlet pupils continuously spun. In the end, a palm shot out. The eyes of the Tong family's old man shrank. He was struck by this palm that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. In the next instant, his body actually began to slowly disintegrate in the air. This power. The Tong family's old man's face was filled with shock and despair. How did things develop like this? This youth, this kind of power, it was the same as the legendary dog. Swish, Hades' phantom image dissipated. The sky, which was originally shrouded in darkness, once again became clear. Sunlight shone down from the sky, quickly illuminating the streets. Bufang's skin seemed to sparkle under the sunlight. Hades' unrestrainedly placed his hands on his waist and laughed. Tremble, tremble under eyes unparalleled power. Nether King laughed unscrupulously. Bufang looked at Hades' as though he was looking at an idiot. Let's go back. Open a shop for business, Bufang said. Then, he turned around and led Xiao Bai away. Hades' was taken aback. He quickly covered his face and followed them. Even though he was running, he didn't forget to create his depressed aura. Bufang and the others left. What was left behind was a dumbfounded scene. One palm, a 2-star true immortal realm existence, was slapped to death. At this moment, everyone's ears were still lingering with Bufang's words. Strip him? No, just slap him to death. He was really slapped to death. When they came back to their senses, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. It was too terrifying. That terrifying phantom image that covered the sky, that palm that made people scratch their heads. Bufang, this mortal, seemed to have an extraordinary background. Xin Yuan Xiaohui and Xin Yuan Xin dropped their jaws, looking into the distance in a daze. It seemed they hadn't recovered from their previous shock. Of course, Hades' and the others knew that it was the clown who followed Bufang around. He was the clown who ate the stinky tofu and laughed at them, revealing his pitch-black teeth. That clown was actually an unfathomable expert. Brother, am I dreaming? Xin Yuan Xin tightly grabbed Xin Yuan Xiaohui's arm, his body shaking unceasingly. Xin Yuan Xia exhaled deeply, trying to calm the throbbing in her heart. I'm fine. Let's go back. Honorbu should be safe now. Seems like I'm not dreaming. Does that mean that Bufang killed someone from the Tong family? Xin Yuan Xin's beautiful eyes widened as he asked. That's right, he killed someone from the Tong family. This was a serious question. According to the nature of the aristocratic families, Bufang's restaurant would have to face the Tong family's endless revenge. However, with that clown-like but unfathomable youth around, nothing would happen. However, every aristocratic family was unfathomable, and the foundation of their experts was unimaginable. Thus, Xin Yuan Xiaowei didn't know what Bufang would have to face. If the Tong family's top expert made a move, Bufang's restaurant would be wiped out in an instant. However, the Tong family's top expert wouldn't make a move. After all, the top experts of the aristocratic families were either trying to break through to the third-grade Heaven Chief realm or exploring the ruins of the Heaven Chief realm, searching for opportunities. We can't do anything. We can only watch from the sidelines. However, there's no point in watching from the sidelines now. Let's go. I've already agreed to the Gongshu family's invitation. Now, I'm officially the Gongshu family's heaven chief. Let's get ready. Tomorrow, we'll enter the inner circle of the immortal city, Xianyuan Xiaohui said as she rubbed Xianyuan Xian's head. Xianyuan Xian nodded and didn't say anything. Just like that, the two of them left the long street, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. Soon, the news of the Tong family's expert being wiped out would spread throughout the entire immortal city. Heaven Chief Restaurant. Bufong pushed open the door. With a creaking sound, Bufong lazily twisted his neck, patting his neck. Inside the restaurant, the Lord Go was sleeping soundly in the corner of the wall. Hua sat beside the Lord Go, diligently cultivating. The Black Dragon King pulled a chair and sat not far from Hua. He rubbed his bald head, and his legs trembled as though he was having a spasm. Seeing that Bufong had returned, the Black Dragon King's eyes instantly lit up. Bufong, young man, don't forget about Ai's 10 spicy strips. I have high hopes for you. Hades' arrow winked at Bufong, then sat at the table. The Heaven Chief's test had ended. Bufong couldn't help but sigh in relief. Although the process was bumpy, it was still considered smooth. As for the Tong family, well, Bufong didn't put them in his eyes at all. Bufong didn't immediately enter the kitchen. He planned to rest for a while. Sitting at the table, he placed both of his hands under his chin and started to ponder. His mind flickered, and his consciousness sank into his body. Host, Bufong True Energy Cultivation Base. Peak of Divine Spirit Realm Cooking Talent. 7-star skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique. 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique. 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Technique. Overlord 13 Blades. 13 out of 13. Gourmet Array, 2 out of 6. Cutting Immortal Style, 0 out of 3 tools. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok, God of Cooking Set. Vermilion Chef Robe, God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Immortal Chef, able to refine the origin energy in ingredients and condense immortal energy. Cooking skills have reached a higher level. System level, level 3, able to fuse immortal energy. True energy conversion rate increased to 200%. System reward, immortal ingredient. 8 treasures pig, 1 fragment of the God of Cooking Set, 4/5. The long-awaited system panel appeared in front of Bufong. After looking through it, Bufong's heart surged. He had collected 4 fragments of the God of Cooking Set. With one more, he could collect 5 fragments in exchange for the next God of Cooking Set. Bufong was really curious about what the next God of Cooking Set would be. The God of Cooking Set was undoubtedly helpful to him. The people of the Heaven Chief Realm said that the God of Cooking Set was an immortal tool. However, Bufong didn't think so. The Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife had cut Tong Cheng's immortal tool, which meant that the God of Cooking Set was more advanced than immortal tools. Anyway, Bufong wasn't in a hurry. His spirit sea was really vast. Currently, the spirit of the Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, the spirit of the Black Turtle Constellation Wok, and the spirit of the Vermilion Chef Robe didn't have any reaction. Thus, if Bufong wanted to fuse with the spirit of the Vermilion Chef Robe, he still had a long way to go. His overall score had also changed to first grade Immortal Chef. Immortal Chef was also divided into levels, which were low, middle, and high, according to the amount of immortal energy he could refine. The denser the immortal energy he could refine, the higher his cooking skill was. Bufong still remembered the bowl of noodles he had seen in the Bronze Palace in the Hidden Dragon Continent. That bowl of noodles had a wisp of immortal energy, which was really thick. The chef who had cooked that bowl of noodles in the Heaven Chief Realm shouldn't be low. However, he was still an immortal chef. The reward for advancing was the 8 treasures pig. The immortal ingredient 8 treasures pig was a pleasant surprise for Bufong. Many people in the Heaven Chief Realm thought that the 8 treasures chicken was an immortal ingredient. However, 80 was still far from being an immortal ingredient. Perhaps if it was raised in the heaven and earth farmland for a while, it could grow into an immortal ingredient. However, it wasn't an immortal ingredient yet. With a thought, Bufong entered the heaven and earth farmland. The system had directly placed the 8 treasures pig in the farmland. Thus, if Bufong wanted to see the 8 treasures pig, he had to come to the farmland. In the Heaven Chief Hall, Mu Luer helped manager chin up. The two of them looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Manager Chin coughed out blood and said, "We probably missed out on a genius. Owner Bu is really not ordinary. However, it doesn't matter. He offended the Tong family, so the other families won't try to recruit him. Without the families, it means that he won't have a chance to enter the land of inheritance and continue to improve himself." Mu Luer analyzed the situation thoroughly. Thus, we don't need to be anxious. We just need to wait for the moment when Bufong is isolated by the other families in the Immortal City. At that time, we'll let Bufong join our City Lord's mansion. It will definitely allow our Heaven Chief team to have a big harvest in the land of inheritance. Manager Chun was slightly stunned. Then his eyes lit up. "Young Pavilion Master, you mean?" Mu Luer had a smile on her face, but her brows were furrowed. Of course, the most important thing now is whether Bufong can survive the revenge of the Tong family. After all, he crippled their genius and killed their 2-star, true immortal realm expert. The Tong family won't let this go easily. Chapter 982. The sky was vast, and the wilderness was boundless. The wind blew the grass. Bufong landed in the heaven and earth farmland. His feet stepped on the crisp green grass, and the air was filled with the fragrance of the soil. It seemed as though it had just rained in the heaven and earth farmland. There were still water droplets hanging on the green grass, which were sparkling and translucent. It was as though the grass was about to emit light. It was too beautiful to behold. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back as he walked through the grass. In a short while, he arrived in front of the wooden house. Neo Hansen was lying on a wooden recliner, snoring. His snoring was rhythmic and rhythmic. Bufong walked in front of Neo Hansen. Looking at the chubby Neo Hansen, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. It seemed like Neo Hansen was very satisfied with the food in the heaven and earth farmland. With a thought, the black turtle constellation walk appeared. Bufong held the black turtle constellation walk and brought it to Neo Hansen's ear. Then he punched the black turtle constellation walk, and a buzzing sound rang out. It was like the evening drum and morning bell. Neo Hansen's whole body quivered, and he fell from the chair. He flipped over and fell on the ground, chewing on the mud. F***CK, your third uncle's grandma's show. Neo Hansen was enraged. He flipped over and crawled up from the ground like a ball. His eyes were burning with anger as he roared. However, after sizing them up, his gaze landed on Bufong, who had a playful look on his face. Seeing Bufong, Neo Hansen almost woke up. "Aha! Owner Bu, why do you have the time of play in the heaven and earth farmland?" Neo Hansen instantly grinned. With a fawning smile, he moved closer to Bufong. Bufong put away the black turtle constellation walk. He glanced at Neo Hansen and said, "You've been eating well recently. Look at the extra fat on your body. Isn't it a good harvest? I ate a lot, so I snuck a taste." Neo Hansen covered his mouth and laughed in embarrassment. "As long as you help me look after the farmland, you can eat as much as you want." Bufong didn't mind. Since Neo Hansen was helping him manage the farmland, Bufong naturally had to give him some benefits. There was nothing wrong with the ingredients. "Really? Thank you, Owner Bu. Of course, it would be even better if I could taste Owner Bu's cooking." Neo Hansen's eyes lit up. He grinned and rubbed his hands together. Compared to the dishes he cooked, the dishes cooked by Bufong were much more delicious. After tasting Bufong's dishes, he felt that his cooking was no different from cow dung. "All right. Did any new creatures appear in the farmland recently?" Bufong walked into the wooden hut and took out a reclining chair. He placed it in front of the wooden hut, then happily lay down. The reclining chair squeaked. New creatures. Neo Hansen was bewildered. He knew that Bufong must have come to the farmland for something. But this new creature isn't a good ingredient. It's nothing new. Neo Hansen scratched his head. How is it not new?" Bufong asked curiously. "This new creature appeared 2 days ago. As soon as it appeared, it took a few fresh cabbages. At that time, this old bull was so angry. Neo San sat on the reclining chair and began a chat with Bu Fong. As soon as it appeared, it took cabbages. Bu Fong's brows arched. Owner Bu, you also know that our cabbages are completely different from ordinary cabbages. Every one of them is very precious. Now that 2 of them were taken, it's really heart-wrenching. Neo San said. Then tell me, which spirit beast took the cabbages? Bu Fong asked, his face expressionless. Pig. Neo Hansen's eyes widened as he said. What? Bu Fong arched his brows. Pig. Neo Hansen snorted white smoke as he said. I dare you to say that again. Bu Fong glanced at Neo Hansen. Neo Hansen was bewildered. Then he grinned. Owner Bu, the new creature is a pig. It took 2 fresh cabbages. Neo Hansen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Pig? Is it the 8 treasures pig? Bu Fong asked. How would this old bull know what kind of pig it is? It took cabbages from this old bull. This old bull doesn't care if it's 8 treasures or 7 treasures. Neo Hansen crossed his arms in front of his chest and raised his head. The immortal ingredient 8 treasures pig was beaten? Take me to see it. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. Although Neo Hansen didn't understand why Bu Fong wanted to see a pig, he obediently brought Bu Fong to a distant place. After walking for a while, a rustling sound rang out from the tall grass. In the next moment, under the watchful eyes of Neo Hansen and Bu Fong, a figure sped away. It leaped high in the air, its round body vividly displayed. There were black spots on its body, and it looked meaty. It was really a pig, a white and plump pig with a swollen face and a bloody nose. On the back of the 8 treasures pig, there was a small figure riding on it. Bu Fong focused his eyes and saw 80's figure. A pig riding chicken? The corner of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. 80's drumstick had already grown back. As 80 grew, its recovery speed was extremely fast, as expected of the 8 treasures chicken, which was comparable to an immortal ingredient. Little 3, the 3-eyed wild lion, followed behind a fat pig and leaped out of the grass. After landing on the ground, the 3-eyed wild lion panted heavily. He was a freaking wild lion of the ruined prison, but he couldn't outrun a pig. This pig was even carrying a chicken. It was simply too embarrassing. When the 8 treasures pig landed on the ground, it faced Bu Fong and Neo Hansen. Its eyes widened, and its nostrils flared as it squeaked nonstop. 80 was riding on the 8 treasures pig's back. When it saw Bu Fong, goosebumps rose all over its body. Cluck, cluck, cluck. 80 glared at Bu Fong with eyes that seemed as though they were about to spit fire. However, when Bu Fong looked at it, it didn't say anything. It clucked as it tumbled down from the back of the 8 treasures pig, then spread its chicken legs and madly ran forward. The 8 treasures pig didn't know what to do. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bu Fong walked toward the 8 treasures pig. Immortal ingredient 8 treasures pig. Bu Fong expressionlessly sized up the fat pig. It was no wonder that Neo Hansen couldn't recognize it. This 8 treasures pig didn't look special at all. However, Bu Fong's mental force could feel the terrifying energy contained within the pig's body. This was a pig that contained immortal energy. If one used this pig to cook, it would be easy to make dishes that contained immortal energy. In other words, this pig could easily make someone become the Heaven Chief. Bu Fong was sure that if this pig appeared in the Heaven Chief realm, it would be sought after by everyone. Patting its belly, the 8 treasures pig's body trembled. Good stuff. Bu Fong stared at the 8 treasures pig with a strange gaze. Then, the corners of his mouth slightly rose. The 8 treasures pig felt a chill run down its spine. Its nostrils immediately widened. After a while, outside the wooden house, the 8 treasures pig was running wildly. Its speed was extremely fast, and it constantly squealed miserably like a pig being slaughtered. Bu Fong weighed the pork breast in his hand, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. There was a wisp of immortal energy swirling around this tender pork breast. Neo Hansen was dumbstruck as he looked at the pork. The pig that had eaten the cabbage seemed to be an extraordinary ingredient. Bufong realized that the 8 treasures pig seemed to have the same characteristics as 80. It could quickly recover from injuries. Even if it lost an arm or a leg, it could quickly grow back. To put it simply, this was a pig with the same characteristics as 80, and it could be reused. Holding the 8 treasures pig in his hand, Bufong left the heaven and earth farmland in satisfaction. Only Nyohan-san was left behind, drooling as he stared at the crazily running 8 treasures pig. 80 was hiding in the bushes, and its little head stuck out. After seeing that Bufong had left, it shook its chicken butt and ran back. Bufong returned to the Heaven Chief restaurant. He stepped into the kitchen, and the bell on the door frame jingled. Bufong looked at the pork breast in his hand, and he couldn't wait to try the effects of the 8 treasures pig. What should he cook? Red braised pork? Sweet and sour ribs? Or roasted meat? Bufong rubbed his chin, looking at the pork breast. His mouth curved into a smile, and in the end, he decided on the cooking method of a dish. Then, I'll cook dompa pork. Dompa pork was a famous dish in Bufong's previous life. Using such a high-quality pork to cook, Bufong couldn't wait. Immortal City, Inner Region. Inside the Tong family's grand mansion, a miserable howl resounded. Damn it! Damn it! That mortal! I must kill him! Tong Cheng's eyes were bloodshot, and tears of blood rolled down his cheeks. His eyes were filled with madness. His head was wrapped in layers of gauze, and he lay powerlessly on the bed, unable to move. However, even though he couldn't move, he couldn't hide his fury and madness. His spirit sea was broken. He couldn't feel his mental energy anymore. Without mental energy, how could he cook? If he couldn't cook, could he still be considered the talented Heaven Chief? If he couldn't cook, he was nothing. Lying on the bed, Tong Chung looked at the ceiling. He had to admit one thing. He was crippled. That damned mortal had used a black walk to smash his spirit sea. Every time he thought about it, Tong Chung felt a knot in his heart, and he vomited blood. Thud! 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 Shortly after, a figure stepped into Tong Cheng's room. It was a middle-aged man. His face was solemn and full of vicissitudes. He walked to Tong Cheng's bed and looked at the listless Tong Cheng, who didn't have a trace of mental energy. A pained look appeared on his face. Dad! Dad! You have to take revenge for me. I'm crippled. I can't accept this. When Tong Cheng saw the figure, he struggled to move his neck. Tears rolled down his cheeks. As tears rolled down his face, the ferocious expression on his face became more intense. Cheng-er, don't worry. I won't let you be crippled like this. That mortal must pay the price. Your third uncle can't die in vain. The middle-aged man clenched his teeth, his eyes mournful. Tong Cheng was bewildered. His third uncle was dead. His 2-star true immortal realm expert was dead. How could third uncle be dead? How could that mortal kill third uncle? Tong Cheng felt his chest tighten, and he wanted to vomit blood again. That mortal has a powerful background. However, I will make him pay the price. Our Tong family isn't a family that anyone can offend. The middle-aged man said coldly. Cheng-er, you should rest well. When the land of inheritance opens, I will find the immortal materials to repair your spirit sea. Tong Cheng's eyes were blank. The middle-aged man left the room and closed the door. He turned around and looked at his subordinates, who were wearing silver battle armor. They were the elites of the Tong family. Every one of them had reached the true immortal realm, and their leader, Tong Mu, was a peak 2-star true immortal realm expert. Second elder, we're ready. Tong Mu's face was cold and solemn as he nodded at the middle-aged man. The dignity of the Tong family cannot be violated. Even if other families offend us, we will chase them down and kill them, let alone a mortal. All of you, quickly go to the outer perimeter of the immortal city and capture that mortal. Just in case, take this immortal tool with you, the middle-aged man said. With a shake of his hand, a ray of light shot towards the man in the lead. This is a middle-grade immortal tool. After activating it, it will allow your cultivation to reach the 3-star true immortal realm. The task of capturing the culprit who killed the third elder will be handed over to you, the middle-aged man said solemnly. Tong Mu was wearing silver armor. And he held onto his spear with one hand. His other hand caught the immortal tool that the middle-aged man threw over. The immortal tool shone brightly, and in the end, it turned into a green wok. Immortal tool? Tong Mu's eyes narrowed. With the support of the immortal tool, Tong Mu, was confident that he could defeat a 3-star true immortal realm expert. Capturing a mortal would be a piece of cake. Second elder, wait for Tong Mu's triumphant return. The culprit who injured young Master Tong Chung must be punished. Those who offend our Tong family must be punished, no matter how far they are. Tong Mu let out a long roar, and his aura soared into the galaxy. In the next instant, more than 10 silver-armored experts followed behind Tong Mu. They rushed out of the Tong family's residence, turning into streaks of silver light as they sped towards the outer perimeter of the immortal city. At this moment, many of the aristocratic families were watching this scene unfold. When the geniuses from the aristocratic families felt the silver aura that pierced through the horizon, their faces turned solemn. The Tong family, Tong Mu, is really powerful. On the official road in the inner perimeter, a carriage slowly moved forward. Xinyuan Xiaowei opened the window of the carriage and looked out. When she felt the terrifying aura that pierced through the sky, she let out a long sigh. The Tong family's counterattack has begun. Owner Bu, are you ready? Chapter 983. In the kitchen, the bubbling sound of boiling water reverberated unceasingly. The bright light illuminated the entire kitchen, and after the boiling water, the rising steam seemed very dense under the illumination of the light. Bufong placed a whole piece of 8 treasures pork on the stove. His mind flickered, and the dragon bone kitchen knife fell into his hand. The dragon bone kitchen knife emitted a dazzling golden radiance, dazzling and eye-catching. Today, Bufong could already communicate with the dragon bone kitchen knife spirit, so he could use the knife with ease. With a twirl of the kitchen knife, Bufong picked up a piece of fatty meat on the table and placed it into the Black Turtle Constellation Wok. In the Black Turtle Constellation Wok, the Heaven Alps Spirit Spring water was boiling. The moment the 8 treasures pork entered the wok, a wisp of immortal energy lingered on the surface of the wok. The water in the wok was boiling. Bufong used a pair of long chopsticks to stir the pork in the wok. The heaven and earth obsidian flame can't handle this level of ingredient anymore. Seems like I have to find a higher level immortal flame. Otherwise, I won't be able to cook higher level immortal ingredients in the future. Bufong looked at the dark gold heaven and earth obsidian flame burning under the Black Turtle Constellation Wok, releasing extreme heat, and gently sighed. As his cultivation increased, the level of the ingredient also increased. There were many ingredients that couldn't be cooked with the heaven and earth obsidian flame. At this time, no matter how good Bufong's cooking skills were, if the food couldn't be cooked, there was nothing he could do. Thus, it became imperative to find an immortal flame. Fortunately, this time, the 8 treasures pork could still be cooked. After blanching the water in the wok and getting rid of the floating foam, Bufong scooped out the pork. The dragon bone kitchen knife flashed, and Bufong's grip on the dragon bone kitchen knife became steadier. For this kind of ingredient that didn't need to be cut quickly, Bufong chose to use the Overlord 13 blades. As for the latest knife technique, the cutting immortal style, Bufong hadn't practiced it yet, so he didn't dare to use it casually. He cut the 8 treasures pork into small, exquisite pieces and neatly arranged them. He took out a clay pot. The dompa pork must be cooked in a clay pot. With a thought, Bufong took out a few bamboo leaves. These crisp and juicy bamboo leaves were harvested from the newly open area of the Heaven and Earth farmland, the bamboo forest. The bamboos growing in this bamboo forest were all spiritual bamboos that contained dense spiritual energy. That was why the bamboos looked like jadeite. He spread the bamboo leaves on the bottom of the clay pot. He cut the Sun Mother ginger into slices and placed them at the bottom. He also cut the scale-tail scallion into slices and placed them together. The pork was placed in the casserole, piling up the whole casserole. After that, the next step was to prepare the seasoning. First, he poured in old soy sauce, then light soy sauce. 2 different kinds of soy sauce with different seasonings. After preparing all these, Bu Fong took out 2 pieces of diamond-like rock candy and stuffed them into the clay pot. He poured half a jar of Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. He covered the casserole and placed it on the stove to stew. He spat out a ball of heaven and earth obsidian flame, igniting the stove. Bu Fong stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His mental force instantly surged out, covering the clay pot. He began to sense the flow of energy in the clay pot. This dish should be of a higher grade than the crystal glazed soup dumplings, but it wasn't that difficult. That was because the ingredients used were different. Extracting the origin energy of the ingredients and condensing it into immortal energy was a step to elevate the dish. Once this step was completed, the taste and texture of the dish would definitely be improved by several levels. It took about half an incense stick of time to stew. When the time was up, Bu Fong opened his eyes. However, his mental force didn't relax at all. At this time, the dompa pork wasn't done yet. When the lid was opened, steam rose up. The rich fragrance of the meat seemed to surge out of the clay pot, instantly wafting out. It permeated the entire Heaven Chief restaurant. In the restaurant, the Black Dragon King, who was playing with Hua, suddenly twitched his nose. His bald head shone as though it was reflecting light. "Smells so good. What new dish is Owner Bu cooking this time?" Hua's triflower snake eyes couldn't help but move. He grinned excitedly, revealing his canine teeth. Lord Go, who was sleeping soundly on the floor, couldn't help but open his drowsy eyes, looking in the direction of the kitchen in surprise. "This smell? Smells so good. It's the smell of meat. It's not sweet and sour ribs. It smells like red braised meat, but it's not an ordinary red braised meat," Lord Go muttered. Nether King Airhot galloped down from the second floor. He lay on the dining table, widening his eyes as he stared in the direction of the kitchen. There was a chili strip in his mouth. It was the 10 chili strips he had gotten from Bu Fong after killing that 2-mark divine ethereal realm expert. He had just finished his stock, and now he could replenish it perfectly. It was simply wonderful. With the chili strip in his mouth, Hades Era's eyes were filled with excitement. This meat is fragrant but not greasy, thick but not pungent. Bu Fong young man's cooking skills are getting better and better. Hades Era exclaimed in admiration. In the kitchen, Bu Fong opened the lid of the clay pot, and steam rose up. The pork in the pot had already turned a reddish-brown color, and there was even a dazzling radiance bursting out. However, it wasn't dazzling, and it was very gentle. Perhaps it was because it wasn't finished yet. Bu Fong believed that when the dompa pork was finished, the radiance that burst out the moment the lid was opened would definitely be dazzling. Taking a pair of chopsticks, he flipped the red braised pork in the clay pot and poured the remaining half of the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew into it. Then, he covered the lid and continued to simmer. This time, it didn't take long to simmer. It took about the time it took for a quarter of an incense stick to burn. Rumble, rumble. Bu Fong's mental force seemed to have turned into a surging wave, unceasingly crashing against the clay pot. The origin energy in the clay pot was constantly flowing. He opened the lid. Wisps of origin energy seemed to be emitting radiance as they circulated in the clay pot. However, under the suppression of Bu Fong's mental force, the origin energy didn't rush out. He asked the system for a clay bowl. Taking out the dompa pour from the clay pot, he placed them into the clay bowl. This clay bowl seemed to be specially prepared for the dompa pork. The mouth of the bowl was small, and the body of the bowl was round. When the dompa pork was placed into the bowl, the glossy and radiant dompa pork could be seen in the mouth of the bowl. Bu Fong then poured the gravy from the clay pot. This gravy wasn't ordinary, as it contained a lot of energy. It contained the taste of bamboo leaves, sun mother ginger, scale-tail scallion, and the wine of the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. However, because it was poured in twice, the wine's aroma slowly dispersed, and it wasn't strong. However, It was this faint wine aroma that made it even more intoxicating. Placing the clay bowl into the black turtle constellation wok, Bufong prepared to start steaming. The final steaming was the key to this dish, because during the steaming process, all the flavor would seep into the dompa pork. And steaming was also a key to condensing immortal energy. Heaven Chief Halmu Luer and Manager Chun had left. Beside Mu Luer, a tall and sturdy man walked with his hands clasped behind his back. This man was the two-star true immortal realm expert who was in charge of the Heaven Chief Hall. This time, this expert had been entrusted by Mu Luer to stop the Tong family's people. Manager Chun and Mu Luer knew that they had missed a chance, but they couldn't miss it a second time. Bufong's culinary talent was shocking, so Mu Luer wanted Bufong to join the City Lord's Heaven Chief team. In the Immortal City, all the aristocratic families were trying to recruit the Heaven Chief, and each of them had formed their own Heaven Chief team. After entering the Land of Inheritance, many places required the Heaven Chief's help, and if the Heaven Chief wanted to improve themselves, they could only enter the Land of Inheritance. In the Land of Inheritance, they could obtain high-grade recipes, and they could even obtain immortal flames. Mu Luer was very optimistic about Bufong. She felt that no one understood Bufong better than she did. From the moment Bufong opened his food stall, she had been paying attention to Bufong. Bufong's entire body was filled with magic, and she was deeply attracted to him. The more she interacted with him, the more she felt that this mortal from the lower realm was unfathomable. Bufong's culinary skills weren't strong, but they were filled with limitless possibilities. His cultivation speed was something that Mu Luer had never seen before. It was precisely because of this that she was able to convince the two-star true immortal realm expert from the Heaven Chief Hall to help Bufong. There was no doubt that the Tong family wanted to take revenge on Bufong. Since the City Lord's mansion wanted to recruit Bufong, they couldn't just stand by and do nothing. It was easy to add flowers to embroidery, but difficult to send charcoal in snowy weather. What they needed to do was to send charcoal in snowy weather. Manager Chin coughed and said to Mu Luer, "The person sent by the Tong family this time is Tong Mu." "Tong Mu? Uncle Mu, do you have the confidence to deal with Tong Mu?" Mu Luer's eyes narrowed, and she turned to look at the tall and sturdy man beside her. That man had a head full of sharp, needle-like hair. His gaze was focused, and his aura was vigorous. Tong Mu. He's the battle maniac of the Tong family's younger generation. Although his culinary skills are trash, his battle skills are terrifying, the man said solemnly. "Young Pavilion Master, is it worth it for a mere mortal like the Heaven Chief?" The man called Uncle Mu looked at Mu Luer seriously. Mu Luer was silent for a long time. Whether it was worth it or not, she didn't know. This was a bet, and the goal was to offend the Tong family. If she lost the bet, the price that the Heaven Chief Hall had to pay would not be small. "I believe it is worth it. Up until now, he has never disappointed me. In fact, he has surpassed my expectations time and time again," Mu Luer said. Manager Chen looked at the side of Mu Luer's face, and the corners of his mouth twitched. "Young Pavilion Master, don't fall for it. He's just a mortal, and he's not worthy of you." "All right, since young Pavilion Master is so confident, Uncle Mu will accompany young Pavilion Master. When a City Lord blames us, Uncle Mu will bear the consequences." The man's gaze was sharp, and his breath was like a dragon's. In the next instant, the three of them turned into streaks of light, flying toward Bufong's store. Mu Luer's mind suddenly moved, and she raised her head. She saw the sky above the store, and black clouds started to gather. Many people in the surroundings also noticed this scene, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. Mu Luer was stunned. This formation, could it be that he's cooking the dish of the Heaven Chief that attracts the heavenly lightning? Manager Chen looked at the black clouds, and he couldn't help but cough a few times. He had a strange expression on his face as he said, "This mortal chef's talent is really terrifying. His dishes attract the lightning punishment as easily as eating or drinking. Moreover, the thickness of the clouds this time and the degree of pressure that burst forth from them caused many people's hearts to sink." In this old man's eyes, this dish seems to be even more extraordinary than that soup dumpling. Manager Chen suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. After Mu Luer heard that, her eyes lit up. This already shows the value of Bu Fong. Boom, boom. As the black clouds continued to pile up in the distance, streaks of silver light tore through the sky. Even the void seemed to be torn and shattered by it. "They're here." Uncle Moo's face was solemn as he stood in front of the Heaven Chief restaurant. His aura rose, and his eyes shone brightly as he looked into the distance. Over there, rays of silver light dissipated and turned into a group of silver-armored powerhouses walking through the air. 16 of them were one-star true immortal realm experts, and their leader, Tong Mu, was a 2-star true immortal realm expert. The terrifying pressure they emitted caused the surrounding people to not dare to breathe loudly. Everyone's body was trembling. This was the foundation of an aristocratic family. This was the result of offending an aristocratic family. It was rare to see a true immortal realm expert in the outer regions, but an aristocratic family had 16 of them. Tong Mu stepped in the air with a silver spear in his hand. Above his body, a silver light twirled around him like a divine dragon. In the distance, 16 silver-armored experts floated in the air. They stood in front of the Heaven Chief restaurant, facing Mu Luer's group of 3. "Heaven Chief Hall, you want to stop me?" Tong Mu's eyes were indifferent as he slightly raised his chin. The corners of his mouth curled upwards. A disdainful voice resounded through the air. "Today, no one can protect that mortal chef. No one can stop me." Chapter 984. The silver light tore through the sky and hovered in front of the Heaven Chief restaurant. Thick black clouds continued to accumulate in the sky, emitting an extremely oppressive aura. It was as though there was a lightning dragon in the clouds, ready to dive down from the sky at any moment. Tong Mu held his silver spear with one hand. That spear was extraordinary, and it flickered with silver light. It was as though it was a slender silver dragon. As the light flickered, it caused people's hearts to involuntarily tighten. "Heaven Chief Hall, you want to stop me?" Tong Mu raised his chin and looked at Mu Luer's group of 3. His voice was filled with disdain. Including him, the Tong family had a total of 16 silver-armored experts. All of them were at the true immortal realm. What did the Heaven Chief Hall have to stop them? Every single true immortal realm expert was extremely powerful, and there was even Tong Mu, who could fight against a 3-star true immortal realm expert. It was simply a joke for the Heaven Chief Hall to stop them. In reality, it was indeed a joke. When Uncle Mu saw the 16 silver-armored experts, he already had the intention to retreat. He might not even be able to stop Tong Mu by himself, let alone the 15 silver-armored experts behind him. Tap, 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 the experts of the Tong family landed on the ground. Every expert's silver armor was radiating with radiance. It made their figures look incomparably heroic. Uncle Mu. Just as Uncle Mu was about to retreat, Mu Luer, who was beside him, frowned and softly called out to him. There was a hint of hope in her voice. Turning his head to look at Mu Luer, Uncle Mu sighed. Forget it, forget it. I'll just treat it as doing this for you, young pavilion master," Uncle Mu said. In the next instant, he raised his head and the muscles on his body bulged. His gaze was like a sharp blade as he looked at Tong Mu. "Today, let me have a taste of the Tong family's martial fanatic. Tong Mu's strength." Uncle Mu roared, and his hair seemed as though it was going to shatter the void. In the next instant, a large blade appeared in his hand. The blade was divided into 2 layers. The blade was ash white, and the back of the blade was black. The broadsword looked extraordinary at first glance. Tong Mu held onto his spear with one hand as he looked at Uncle Mu's imposing aura. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. The surrounding people also sucked in a breath of cold air. No one had thought that the immortal kitchen pavilion would actually stand up at this time and stop the Tong family. However, it was clear that the 3 of them would not be able to stop him. "You're too weak." Tong Mu looked at Uncle Mu indifferently and sneered. The undisguised ridicule in those words made Uncle Mu's hair stand on end. Arrogant brat. Whether I'm weak or not, we'll only know after we fight. There was a tearing sound. As he waved his blade, the air seemed to be sliced apart. Gravel flew up from the ground. The frightening aura of a 2-star true immortal realm expert was fully displayed at this moment. This was a 2-star true immortal realm expert. The surrounding people were all amazed, but most of them revealed expressions of interest. Tong Mu was also a 2-star true immortal realm expert, and no one knew if there would be a fierce battle. Manager Chen brought Mu Luer and retreated far away. Their eyes were fixed on the battle that was about to take place. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes lit up. In the next instant, it was as though a ferocious silver dragon had appeared. Its speed was as fast as lightning. Tong Yu made his move. His spear pierced toward Uncle Mu. In the blink of an eye, the spear was like a dragon. Uncle Mu felt as though the blade in his hand was no longer under his control. The silver spear ruthlessly smashed into his body. Pucci, it was just one move. Uncle Mu was defeated. If Tong Mu hadn't shown mercy, Uncle Mu's body would have been blasted apart by the spear light. Mu Luer and Manager Chen's eyes narrowed. The gap between Uncle Mu and Tong Mu was actually so big. Martial fanatic Tong Mu. His reputation was well-deserved. Tong Mu held the silver spear with one hand as he slowly walked forward, quickly passing by Uncle Mu. Tong Mu did not even look at Uncle Mu. There were different levels of strength within the 2-star true immortal realm. Tong Mu's cultivation could be considered at the peak of the 2-star true immortal realm, and he could even fight against a 3-star true immortal realm expert. One had to know that every single star in the true immortal realm was like a heavenly moat. Tong Mu was actually able to instantly kill Uncle Mu with his 2-star true immortal realm cultivation. It was enough to show how terrifying he was. This time, the Tong family was serious. Who could block 16 silver-armored true immortal realm experts? Tong Mu indifferently glanced at Mu Luer and Manager Chun. He did not bother with them as he walked toward the Heaven Chief restaurant. Soon, a group of people surrounded the entrance of the restaurant. "Blast the door open," Tong Mu said indifferently. In the next instant, the 2 silver-armored guards beside him nodded their heads and took out their spears. The spears revolved, and it seemed as though they wanted to tear the air apart. They stabbed toward the door in front of them, bringing with them a terrifying spiral of energy. If these 2 spears landed, the door of the restaurant would definitely be blasted into pieces. However, just when everyone thought that a loud explosion was about to happen, a long, creaking sound rang out. In the next instant, the tightly shut door of the restaurant was slowly opened. A shiny, bald head suddenly poked out of the restaurant. "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why is there such a huge commotion? Can't you let us obediently wait for our food?" The Black Dragon King opened his eyes wide and shouted at the top of his lungs. However, the moment he shouted, he noticed that everyone had a strange expression on their faces. Looking at the spear light in front of him, the Black Dragon King sucked in a breath of cold air. He immediately retracted his head and closed the door of the restaurant. Boom! The silver light instantly landed on the restaurant's door. However, the explosion that everyone imagined did not happen. In fact, it did not even shake. The green smoke slowly dissipated, and the door was not damaged in the slightest. Everyone had a look of disbelief on their faces. The attacks of 2 1-star, true immortal realm experts actually did not shatter the restaurant's door. How is this possible? The pupils of the 2 silver-armored guards shrank as they cried out in alarm. With their explosive power, not to mention a door, they could even blast a hole in a mountain. In the sky, the oppressive aura became denser and denser. It was as though lightning was about to strike down. Tong Mu sucked in a breath of cold air, and his eyes slightly narrowed. In the next instant, he took a step forward, and his body turned into a bolt of silver lightning as he shot out. Holding onto the long spear, he stabbed it towards the restaurant's door. Rip! It was as though a silver dragon had soared through the air. A silver light shot out like a bolt of lightning, striking the door. However, just as the lightning was about to strike the restaurant's door, with a creak, the tightly shut door of the restaurant opened once more. A black dog wagging its tail slowly walked out with its cat-like steps. Everyone was slightly taken aback. A dog? Why did the restaurant send out a dog? Did it choose to give up on resisting? When the people in the surroundings saw the dog walking with cat-like steps, some of them couldn't help but sneer in their hearts. Tong Mu held onto the long spear, and his brows furrowed. Why is it a dog? Shouldn't it be the handsome man who killed third uncle? Tong Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. Previously, the two-star true immortal realm expert of the Tong family was slapped to death by a handsome youth. Other than completing his mission, Tong Mu's most important goal was to find that youth. Lord Go walked with graceful cat-like steps to the top of the stone stairs in front of the restaurant. Be quiet. The red braised meat is at its most crucial moment. Don't make a fuss. Lord Go yawned, and his eyes were still drowsy. However, the moment those words left his mouth, everyone present was dumbfounded. Why was the scene so strange? At such a tense moment, a dog that had just woken up actually ran out of the restaurant and told them to stop making a fuss. Wasn't it very comical? Sizzle. The silver spear light turned into a silver dragon, and it shot towards Lord Go, who was standing in front of the restaurant's entrance. Everyone's hearts shrank. In the next moment, the black dog blood would splatter everywhere. Lord Go indifferently glanced at the spear light that was shooting towards him, and he slightly raised his paw. In the next instant, he lightly patted it. Tong Mu's body trembled, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His spear light was actually easily patted away by a dog. Rumble. Lord Go smashed the spear light. He didn't care about Tong Mu and the others. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the sky. There, a lightning dragon was roaring. Rumble. The ground trembled. Then, everyone's eyes lit up as they looked at the huge figure that was shooting out of the restaurant. It was Xiao Bai. The moment Xiao Bai appeared, the metal wings on his back unfurled, and lightning arcs danced around his body. In the kitchen, Bu Fong's mental energy seemed to have turned into ripples as it continuously rushed out to guide the dish in the black turtle constellation walk. Rumbling sounds rang out from the steamer, and steam rose to the sky. In the end, the fire was extinguished. Bu Fong opened his eyes. The 8 treasures red braised meat was done. With a thought, Bu Fong stood up and walked towards the black turtle constellation walk with his hands behind his back. Slowly, he opened the lid of the steamer. Steam rose up from the steamer. The moment the steam rose up, the hazy white smoke scattered. In the center of the steamer, a ruby-like light shot out. It was extremely beautiful. Rumble. The moment the lid was opened, the arena in the sky roared and fell down. An oppressive aura approached. Everyone retreated in fear. Facing the lightning punishment, everyone had a certain level of respect. The light gradually dimmed, and the lid was opened. A wisp of immortal energy revolved around the bowl, and it looked like a small dragon. At the mouth of the bowl, the ruby-like red braised meat emitted a bright red light. The commotion outside was naturally noticed by Bu Fong. However, with Lord Go around, he didn't need to worry too much about it. Holding the bowl, Bu Fong walked out of the kitchen. Ring, ring. The bell hanging on the door emitted a crisp sound. A rich fragrance spread out, and a resplendent light shot out. Bu Fong placed the bowl on the table. The thick aroma of meat emitted from the sparkling and translucent red braised meat, which looked like a carved gem. Hades' era instantly narrowed his eyes. Saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth as he sniffed the aroma in the air. The eyes of the Black Dragon King and you also sparkled. The dish was done, and the lightning punishment fell. Outside the restaurant, lightning struck from the sky. Then, in everyone's eyes, it was swallowed by the iron puppet that soared into the sky. The entire place was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked. Boom! Xiao Bai landed hard on the ground. Lightning arcs crackled on his body. He stood next to Lord Go, his mechanical eyes twinkling. He looked like a man who could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. It smells so good. The aroma has reached here. Looks like the red braised meat is done. Lord Go can't wait anymore. A moment later, Lord Go raised his dog eyes, looking at the bewildered, silver-armored experts in the distance. If you have something to say it quickly. Lord Go, I'm in a hurry, Lord Go said calmly. Chapter 985. If you have something to say, hurry up and say it. This dog was simply too savage. Did this dog know who it was facing? Why was it in a hurry? Why was a dog in a hurry? Everyone in the surroundings was shocked by the black dog's words. Everyone was speechless. It wasn't strange for a dog to speak. In the Heaven Chief realm, there were many spirit beasts that could speak, and there were also many that couldn't. However, for a dog to tell a peak 2-star, true immortal realm expert that it was in a hurry, that was strange. This dog wouldn't be rushing to its death, right? A sweet fragrance wafted through the air, causing everyone to be slightly moved. Mu Luer supported Manager Chun and the heavily injured Uncle Mu to the entrance of the restaurant. The Lord Go glanced at the three of them and snorted before letting them in. Although the Lord Go was sleeping, he could clearly sense the actions of the three of them. Go in. The Lord Go will ensure your safety. The Lord Go said indifferently. Mu Luer's face stiffened. This dog really loved to joke around. Mu Luer wasn't worried about her life. She believed that Tong Yu wouldn't dare to kill her. After all, she was the daughter of the city lord. If he killed her, the Tong family would face a lot of trouble. The reason she entered the restaurant was because she smelled a fragrant aroma. This smell barged into her nose in a barbaric manner, causing her entire body to quiver involuntarily. Thus, she wanted to see the dish that emitted this aroma. Without a doubt, this was a dish that had attracted the heavenly punishment. Manager Chun had said that the heavenly punishment of this dish was even stronger than the soup dumplings. In other words, this dish might even taste better than the soup dumplings. The moment they entered the restaurant, the familiar decorations were reflected in their eyes. Manager Chun and Mu Luer weren't surprised. After all, they were already familiar with this restaurant. On the other hand, the heavily injured Uncle Mu coughed out blood, and his mental state was extremely dispirited. He looked around, and a bitter expression appeared on his face. He was actually injured because he wanted to protect the chef who opened a small restaurant. Tong Yu's cultivation was too strong. A single spear strike was enough to defeat him. This made him feel very aggrieved. In the restaurant, many people's eyes turned to look at them. Mu Luer and Manager Chun smiled at that group of people. Bu Fong expressionlessly stood at the entrance of the kitchen, which was blocked by tables. He looked at Manager Chun, Mu Luer, and a burly man who was half dead. However, this doubt only lasted for a moment. His attention was attracted by the 8 treasures red braised pork on the table. Hua stood on the chair and tiptoed. The muscles on her fair calves trembled slightly. Her tri-flower snake eyes stared at the braised pork in the porcelain bowl, and saliva kept dripping from her tender mouth. Oh my God, you scared this Dragon King to death. This Dragon King's head was almost cut off. The Black Dragon King rubbed his head as he cried out in fear. Just now, he had secretly opened the restaurant's door, and the sharp spear light had shot toward his head. It had almost caused his heart to jump out of his chest. Fortunately, Lord Go couldn't stand the sound of the spear light hitting the door, and he ran out with his cat-like steps. The Black Dragon King was rejoicing in other people's misfortune. Those arrogant fellows would soon feel despair. Although Elder Dog often abducted his daughter unscrupulously, he had to admit that the dog was indeed very awesome. With a swipe of its paw, it could shatter the heavens and crack the earth. At this moment, only the fragrant braised pork was left in Hades' eyes. The chili strip in his mouth fell onto the table. Buffon young man, how can braised pork look so good? You quietly sat on her seat, and her pitch-black eyes reflected the ruby-like braised pork. Her red lips trembled, and a look of desire appeared on her beautiful face. Naturally, Mu Luer also saw the dish on the table. The rich aroma seemed to have permeated the entire world, invading her taste buds from all angles. She subconsciously walked forward and sat on the dining table. Manager Chen sucked in a breath of cold air. This immortal energy is really thick, and the fragrance is even thicker. The braised pork is as exquisite as a work of art. It's too beautiful to behold. Words of praise lingered in his ears. Manager Chun had to admit that Bu Fong was talented. Bu Fong's cooking talent was really good. Perhaps this was the reason why the young pavilion master insisted on protecting Bu Fong. To this kind of cold and aloof genius, sending charcoal in the snow was indeed easier to move than adding flowers to brocade. Uncle Mu, who was heavily injured, also sat on a chair. His arms leaned on the table as he panted. However, the rich fragrance really surprised him. "Can we start?" Uncle Mu panted as he looked at Bu Fong. As soon as he said that, everyone turned to look at him. Bu Fong looked at him with an astonished expression. Then, he said, "Wait a moment. Wait for a dog. Wait for a dog." Mulur, Uncle Mu, and Manager Chun were stunned. In the next moment, their expressions became incomparably strange. Shouldn't they eat it while it's hot? If they waited for Tong Mu to charge in, they wouldn't have the chance to taste the delicacies anymore. This mortal chef, how could he be so insensible? Outside the restaurant, the Lord Go's words thoroughly infuriated Tong Mu. A mere dog actually dared to be so arrogant? He, Tong Mu, had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Did he really think that he would be scared by a dog? He thought back to when he entered the boundless wasteland outside the immortal city to hunt fierce beasts. The number of fierce beasts that died in his hands was countless. Today, he was actually ridiculed by a dog. "Oh, slaughter this dog for me." Tong Mu took a deep breath, and his eyes became indifferent as he ordered the silver-armored expert beside him. The two guards who were unable to break through the restaurant's doors took in a deep breath. In the next instant, they made their moves. The spear was like a dragon, and it was like a flash of silver lightning. In just an instant, it had already appeared far away. Its speed was so fast that no one could see it. With a ripping sound, the sky seemed to be torn apart. Two silver spear lights turned into two dragons, entangling with each other as they shot toward Lord Dog. The Lord Go stood in front of the restaurant and yawned. His dog tail swayed back and forth, facing the two powerful spear lights. He didn't seem to care about them at all. He raised his exquisite paw and lightly tapped the air. In an instant, the spear lights froze in the air, unable to move. The eyes of the two silver-armored experts instantly shrank. They sucked in a breath of cold air. How is this possible? Tong Mu's eyes narrowed, and in that instant, his entire being became spirited. Not ordinary. This dog is not ordinary. He, Tong Mu, had walked the line between life and death many times. This feeling was definitely not wrong. Previously, he had looked down on this dog. However, at this moment, he could see that this black dog was able to easily stop the spear lights shot out by his two subordinates. This dog was definitely not ordinary. According to the information from yesterday, if the one who made a move was the youth who killed his third uncle with a single slap, Tong Mu wouldn't be so nervous. Even though his third uncle's cultivation was at the 2-star true immortal realm, he wasn't that strong. Tong Mu was able to kill his third uncle with a single spear strike. However, this dog in front of him gave him a strange feeling. Be careful. The 15 of you attacked together. Tong Mu's pupils shrank slightly, and he let out a long breath. He didn't dare to be careless as he said this. The surrounding people also sucked in a breath of cold air. 15 silver-armored guardians charged at the same time. A mere dog actually caused Tong Mu to be so serious? What kind of scene would it be when 15 silver-armored guards attacked at the same time? This time, the surrounding people finally witnessed it. Terrifying true immortal realm auras were emitted from the bodies of these experts. An origin soul appeared above each of their heads. Buzz! In the next instant, streaks of spear light tore through the sky and soared into the sky. The 15 silver-armored experts turned into streaks of light as they wielded their silver spears and charged toward the dog lying in front of the restaurant. Every single one of them let out a roar, and their shouts seemed as though they wanted to shatter the minds of those who heard them. Tong Mu was extremely satisfied when he saw this scene. These were the soldiers under him. Even though their culinary talents were ordinary, no one dared to look down on them when they walked in a mortal city. This was because they were his, Tong Mu's, soldiers. They were soldiers who had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood, soldiers who had gone through life and death together with him. Every single one of them was an elite expert. They were well-known figures within the one-star true immortal realm, and every single one of them could fight against the two-star true immortal realm expert from the Heaven Chief Hall. Boom! Boom! A silver-armored expert was the first to land on the ground, and the ground exploded. His figure was like a wild beast as he charged toward the Lord Go. With a sweep of his spear, the air around him exploded. A dog! Die! That expert bellowed. Another silver-armored expert was incomparably elegant. His long spear seemed to turn into a flying sword, and as he stepped on it, he descended from the sky like a streak of light. Someone waved his long spear, and tens of thousands of spear lights poured down like a waterfall. The surrounding people cried out in alarm. This scene was hard to imagine for people like them who lived in a mortal city and fought for the dream of becoming a heaven chief. It was rare for them to experience such a terrifying slaughter. Thus, when this kind of fighting style appeared, everyone's blood started to boil. Everyone felt a throbbing sensation coursing through their bodies. Kill. The silver-armored army is unstoppable. Do your best. You guys are the best. The surrounding people were infected by the hot-bloodedness of the silver-armored army, and they all started to cheer. They actually subconsciously cheered for the silver-armored army. Tong Mu held his silver spear, and the scarlet cloak behind him slowly fluttered in the wind. The corner of his mouth rose slightly. These are my soldiers. In the restaurant, hearing the shouts from outside, the faces of Mu Luer and the others instantly turned ugly. It's over. Tong Mu's soldiers are absolute weapons of war. This restaurant is finished, Uncle Mu said with a dazed look in his eyes. Mu Luer's face turned slightly pale. The might of the silver-armored army outside was indeed terrifying. As the daughter of the city lord, she had never seen such a terrifying scene before. She had actually thought of asking Uncle Mu to stop them. What a ridiculous idea. Let's quickly eat. Otherwise, we won't have a chance to eat this red braised meat later. Uncle Mu said, although he was afraid of the silver-armored army's might, he couldn't resist the temptation of the red braised meat. No rush. Wait for the dog. Bufang calmly said. Mu Luer and the others were stunned. In the next instant, they scanned the entire restaurant seriously. They discovered that the people inside didn't have the slightest trace of fear on their faces. Why are they so confident in this dog? Outside the restaurant, the wind became bitingly cold, and it whistled unceasingly. The fur on Lord Go's body fluttered in the wind. Looking at the 15 silver-armored experts charging at him, he looked at the majestic scene before him. The Lord Go's mouth suddenly twitched. He let out a snort and laughed. In the next instant, he straightened his body and his abdomen bulged. The fur on his body curled up, and he opened his mouth wide. Facing in front of him, he opened his mouth and let out a loud bark. The dog's bark was like the evening drum and morning bell. It rumbled like thunder, like the roar of a tiger, and like the cry of a dragon. It was deafening, and it seemed capable of destroying heaven and earth. Explosions rang out everywhere. Everyone's expression changed. When Tong Mu heard the dog bark, his pupils shrank. Chapter 986. A dog's bark had scared many people into wetting their pants. The surrounding onlookers felt their legs go soft after hearing the dog's bark. They felt as if they weren't facing a dog, but an ancient beast, the kind that could roar to the heavens. Some people's legs went soft, and they slumped to the ground, their faces filled with fear. Some of them were trembling, their bodies stiff. They had never imagined that a mere dog would have such a terrifying side to it. Was that still a dog? It was a dragon in dog skin. However, with the Lord Go's roar, The onlookers' encouragement for the silver-armored soldiers became even more enthusiastic. In their eyes, the silver-armored soldiers were like warriors who were going to slay demons. The black dog that had burst out with a terrifying bark was like a legendary demon that was being attacked by the silver-armored soldiers. The onlookers naturally hoped that the silver-armored soldiers, who represented justice, could win. Of course, in reality, there was no such thing as justice. The Lord Go barked. The silver-armored soldiers, who were rushing over from all directions, trembled. A silver-armored soldier brandished his long spear. His muscles bulged, and he had already arrived in front of the Lord Go. That silver long spear seemed to have turned into a whip that could strike the heavens and earth, ruthlessly lashing at the Lord Go. He wanted to whip the Lord Go to death. However, the Lord Go was still the Lord Go. A dog's bark. It made the silver-armored expert's body stiffen on the spot. Waves of wind whistled out of his mouth, making it impossible for the other party to move forward. The silver-armored expert was mad with rage. He was actually stopped by a dog. What a scandal! With a long howl, the veins on his neck bulged. The silver-armored expert wanted to whip the Lord Go to death with a stick. Crack! However, in the end, he couldn't do it. The long spear was bent and broken by the Lord Go's terrifying barking. The silver-armored expert felt a huge force hit his body. His origin soul seemed to collapse from the bark. With a puff, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The silver-armored expert was sent flying. Flying stream, descending 3,000 feet. An expert came over with spear radiance. The silver spear radiance blotted out the sky like a waterfall, pouring down in torrents. Boom, boom, boom. Those were spear glows that contained boundless might. If they were to hit, even the ground would be blasted into a sieve. However, it was still useless. No matter how many tricks you use, the Lord Go will deal with it with a bark. The thousands of spear lights actually flowed backward under this dog's bark. Reverse the waterfall? The expert who used this move immediately felt a chill all over his body. There was even a hint of fear in his eyes. Poochie! Poochie! He was completely defenseless. The tens of thousands of spear lights flowed back, instantly piercing the caster into a sieve. Every single spear light that he unleashed blasted into his own body. The energy that burst out from his body actually backfired on him, turning him into a sieve. What a horrifying scene this was. That expert's howl came to an abrupt end because he no longer had the strength to howl. With a loud bang, a tattered corpse fell to the ground. Fresh blood flowed all over the ground. A silver-armored expert died. However, this was just the beginning. A dog's bark had killed a silver-armored soldier. The chests of the others were heaving up and down. Their faces were filled with fear as they looked at the dog. Tong Mu clenched his fists tightly, and green veins popped out on his forehead. Fresh blood flowed out, and the remaining 14 silver-armored soldiers narrowed their eyes. Killing intent surged out of them. They were originally just playing around, but they finally felt the threat of death. Boom! Spear lights soared into the sky, intertwining in the air. In the next instant, they turned into a net of spear lights that shot toward the Lord Go. The spear net revolved with energy. Without a doubt, anyone who was caught in it would be killed. Kill him for me. Tong Yu roared. The 14 silver-armored soldiers roared at the same time. Boom! Boom! The surrounding spectators felt as though they were about to suffocate. It was as though they were watching an intense battle unfold. They were very curious as to what the final result would be. In the restaurant, the atmosphere was somewhat stagnant. Muluer looked at Bufong, then at Nether King Ha and the others beside her. Her breathing involuntarily slowed down. Uncle Mu panted heavily. He didn't know what these people were waiting for. A dog. What was there to wait for? Bufong crossed his hands behind his back as he slowly paced around the table. He wasn't in a hurry. The dish had immortal energy, and it wouldn't be a problem for it to last for 10,000 years. Hua's tri-flower snake eyes spun, and she jumped down from her chair. She pulled Yu's hand as they walked out of the restaurant. It was as though she wanted to see the Lord Go's heroic figure. Yu didn't reject her, and she followed after them. Mu Luer's heart shook, and she also chose to follow them. She could feel the trust Bufong had in the dog outside. This kind of trust made her curious. When they reached the door, Muluer stuck her head out. Muluer's eyes suddenly froze, and she seemed to be in a daze. The situation outside was completely out of her expectations, and it was completely different from what she had imagined. The air was filled with the smell of blood, and the smell was very strong. In the distance, a silver-armored expert of the Tong family had been pierced into a sieve, and he fell to the ground, no longer breathing. A silver-armored expert died? That dog actually killed a silver-armored expert. It didn't surprise Muluer much. What happened next made her feel as though she was about to stop breathing. 14 silver-armored experts held their long spears, their eyes red. Each of them released their strongest fighting strength as they charged towards the black dog. The pressure that filled the air made people's legs tremble. It was as though it felt the audience behind it. Lord Go lazily turned his head, and his gaze landed on Yuan Hua, who was cheering excitedly. The corners of Lord Go's mouth slightly rose. Then he slowly raised his exquisite dog paw. Swish, swish, swish. The instant Lord Go raised his exquisite dog paw, every one of the silver-armored experts moved. Their figures seemed to have turned into lightning, constantly changing in the void. However, as they changed, they still charged towards Lord Go. Is the red braised meat ready? Lord Go yawned as he asked. Muluer was slightly stunned. In the next instant, she hurriedly replied, Yes. Yeso. Then let's not waste any more time. The corners of Lord Go's mouth twitched. In the next instant, the exquisite dog paw that was raised in the air suddenly slammed down. Boom! Monstrous nether energy surged out from Lord Go's body. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky seemed to darken. The silver-armored experts' figures trembled, and in the next instant, their speed reached its peak. However, soon, they were shocked to find that they couldn't get close to that black dog. The pitch-black nether energy turned into a huge dog paw that blotted out the sun. The net of spears directly collapsed. Within the dog paw, the 14 silver-armored experts continuously moved. Their spears were like dragons, and they wanted to break free from the dog paw's bindings. However, as the nether energy dog paw slowly pressed down on them, their breathing became extremely intense, and fear began to spread in their hearts. They couldn't escape from the dog paw. However, they didn't want to be slapped to death by the dog paw. Long howls burst forth from the dog's paw. However, the surrounding spectators felt their mouths go dry. That dog, did it become a spirit? This paw seemed to be able to crush down on them. It caused everyone to feel despair. Boom! One by one, the silver-armored experts were pressed to the ground. They held onto their silver spears as they tried to block the black dog paw. They wanted to prop up the sky. However, Lord Go tilted his head and slowly pressed down with the dog paw. In the next instant, the spears were bent and broken. The silver-armored experts could only use their arms to block the dog paw. Tong Mu, who was watching from afar, felt his blood boiling. A long howl rang out. He grabbed the silver spear in his hand and kicked the handle of the spear. In an instant, the silver spear turned into an arrow as it whizzed forward. Its speed was as fast as lightning. It was like a bolt of lightning that wanted to tear the sky apart. Break for me! Tong Mu roared, and the aura around his body expanded. He was like a giant that wanted to prop up the sky. Kacha! Kacha! A series of explosions rang out. The silver-armored experts knelt on the ground with great difficulty. Their armors were shattered, and sweat and blood flowed down their bodies. Boom! Tong Mu appeared and punched out. This punch seemed to suck out all the energy in the world. Break for me! The silver spear rushed over and smashed into the dog paw made of nether energy. However, the nether energy dog paw churned. In the next instant, the silver spear directly pierced through the dog paw. It pierced through one of the silver-armored experts that was supporting the dog paw. Poochie, that expert, directly exploded into pieces. Tong Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. His eyes turned blood red. Damn it, you're just a dog. I'll beat you up. Tong Mu punched out as he executed a fist technique. Behind him, it was as though a curtain of the sky had appeared. Above the curtain of the sky, stars twinkled, and rays of light cascaded down. A fist shot out. Poochie! 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 A loud explosion rang out. The ground caved in deeply. The dog paw also dissipated. Tong Mu's fist smashed towards the Lord Go. Tong Mu's eyes turned scarlet red. Behind him, the silver-armored experts exploded one after another. There was no sign of life left in them. They were all smashed apart by a single dog paw. Die! Tong Mu's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He never imagined that his silver-armored guards would be smashed apart in an instant. Facing Tong Mu's fist, Mu Luer felt as though someone was strangling her throat. Her body started to tremble violently. It was as though death was approaching. Oh, there's still one fish that escaped the net. Tong Mu's fist was blocked in the end. It was easily blocked by the Lord Go's exquisite dog paw. Tong Mu's gaze turned sluggish. His fist that contained all his strength was blocked just like that. Could this dog be in existence at the peak of the 3-star true immortal realm? Or perhaps the 4-star true immortal realm expert? Bang! The Lord Go raised his dog paw and slapped down. Tong Mu could only watch as one of his arms exploded under the attack of the claw. His figure was sent flying, and he landed heavily on the ground. He coughed out a mouthful of blood. He rolled and crawled to his feet. Tong Mu's eyes narrowed. He looked around, and the people around him were dumbstruck. The air was filled with a thick smell of blood. His 15 silver-armored guards were completely annihilated. He staggered as he stood up. Tong Mu's gaze became extremely sharp. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of footsteps rang out. Bu Fong walked out of the restaurant, and his skinny figure leaned against the door. Tong Mu glared at Bu Fong as he spoke malevolently. His voice had become somewhat hoarse. "You're the mortal chef that injured Tong Chung," Tong Mu said coldly. Bu Fong leaned against the door, and he furrowed his brows. "Oh, if there's no one else, then it's me," Bu Fong said. In the next instant, Tong Mu laughed. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his laughter was extremely sinister. "I heard that you used a wok to destroy Tong Cheng's spirit sea. Today, I will use a wok to kill all of you." Boom! As soon as he said that, Tong Mu's aura surged, and his hand shone with a resplendent light. Dense, immortal energy circulated around it. It's an immortal tool. What a dense, immortal energy. Is it a mid-grade immortal tool? The Tong family actually gave their immortal tool to Tong Mu. This is a sure kill situation. It's a pity that the immortal tool was taken out too late. The surrounding people started to chatter, and they exclaimed in surprise. A green wok appeared above Tong Mu's head. Tong Mu poured all his true energy into the green wok, and his blood and energy rapidly flowed away. He was using the craziest method to activate his immortal tool. Rumble. Thunder seemed to explode in the sky. Then, Tong Mu's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he used his remaining arm to smash the green wok toward the Heaven Chief restaurant. As the blue wok moved, the void began to shatter. Chapter 987. The green wok moved horizontally, bringing with it a heavy and oppressive aura. Immortal energy revolved around the wok, and every strand of immortal energy weighed more than 10,000 kilograms. As it moved horizontally, the void around it shattered. Everyone's eyes shrank, and they felt a chill run down their spines. This was the power of a mid-grade immortal tool. The Tong family had really thrown caution to the wind. They actually took out a mid-grade immortal tool. They really wanted to fight to the death with this mortal chef. With Tong Mu's cultivation and the power of a mid-grade immortal tool, the terrifying might he could unleash could even kill a 3-star true immortal realm expert. Bu Fong looked at the green wok that was flying toward them with a strange look in his eyes. This wok was mysterious, and the immortal energy around it made Bu Fong curious. Rumble. The green walk rumbled as it smashed towards them. The wind howled, causing everyone's hair to flutter under the pressure of the wind. Mu Luer's body stiffened, and her legs went soft. The Tong family had gone crazy. They actually took out a mid-grade immortal tool just to deal with a mortal chef from the lower realm. How was she supposed to escape? She couldn't escape. This restaurant would definitely be smashed into smithereens by this mid-grade immortal tool, and she might die here. Tong Mu laughed crazily. Even though he had lost an arm, his face was filled with madness. His chest heaved up and down, and half of the armor on his body was broken. He looked incomparably pitiful. However, no matter how pitiful he looked, it couldn't compare to the anger and sorrow in his heart. His soldiers were all dead. With a swipe of that black dog's paw, all of them exploded. This dog was too strong, and Tong Mu couldn't defeat it. However, it didn't matter. He had a mid-grade immortal tool. Once he used it, he would definitely be able to turn this small restaurant into ashes. Die. All of you shall be buried together with my soldiers. Tong Mu roared, and his eyes were filled with madness. Rumble, rumble. Under the fearful gazes of the onlookers, the green walk slowly smashed over. Everything was collapsing. Lord Go stood in front of the restaurant. He raised his head and looked at the green walk that kept coming. There was a strange expression on his face. He could see Tong Mu's madness, and he could feel Mu Luer's despair. Tilting his head, the corner of Lord Go's mouth twitched. Mid-grade immortal tools. In fact, high-grade immortal tools taste even better, and supreme-grade immortal tools are even more delicious. Lord Go's magnetic voice resounded. His words stunned everyone. Immortal tools taste better? Everyone was dumbfounded. Bufang also looked at the Lord Go with slight surprise. Could it be that this fat dog wanted to eat the immortal tool? Can this thing be eaten? Buzz above the green walk, an illusory green snake suddenly appeared. Immortals had artifact spirits, and it was precisely because of the existence of artifact spirits that immortal tools were extraordinary. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The green snake flicked its forked tongue, its eyes filled with violence. Suddenly, the Lord Go moved. His buttocks slightly twisted. Then he took graceful cat-like steps and soared into the sky. He slowly walked toward the green walk that was pressing down on him. Mu Luer's eyes froze, and she held her breath as she stared at the black dog that seemed to be creating another miracle. Bufang looked at the artifact spirit above the green walk. His eyes slightly narrowed. In the next instant, the black turtle constellation walk appeared in his hand. The moment the black turtle constellation walk appeared, it seemed to sense the green walk's aura, and an earthen yellow halo revolved around it. It was a buzz. It flew out of Bufang's hand, dashing into the distance. The black turtle constellation walk's speed was extremely fast. Compared to the mystical green walk, which emitted a green light, the pitch-black black turtle constellation walk looked like a lump. However, when the black turtle constellation walk approached the green walk, the green snake that emerged from the green walk let out a sharp hiss. Buzz, the earthen yellow halo suddenly expanded. In the next instant, a black tortoise with a mountain on its back that seemed to be able to support the heavens and earth appeared. The black tortoise raised its foot and ruthlessly pressed down on the green snake. It opened its mouth and bit down on the snake, tearing it apart. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The green snake was torn apart inch by inch, and it was swallowed. Tong Mu was dumbstruck. He was completely dumbfounded. What happened just now? Why was the spirit of the immortal tool swallowed? What was that tortoise? After swallowing the spirit, the black turtle constellation walk's light dissipated, and it returned to its original pitch-black color. It flew back to Bufang's side. With a bang, it disappeared from Bufang's hand. Bufang's face was filled with a strange expression. In his spirit sea, he seemed to hear the spirit of the black turtle constellation walk burp. It seemed like the spirit of the black turtle constellation walk was quite satisfied. Lord Go's mouth twitched, and he looked at the green walk that had lost its spirit. For a moment, he was bored to death. An immortal tool without its spirit is like sweet and sour ribs without the sauce. What's so good about it? Lord Go stuck out his tongue and said indifferently, After that, he didn't do anything else. Facing the huge green wok, he didn't do anything. Lord Go only raised his dog paw and gently slapped it forward. In the next instant, the large green wok caved in and directly shattered into pieces with a loud bang. A huge explosion occurred in the air. The light from the explosion seemed to light up the entire immortal city. A terrifying aura spread out, and everyone in the crowd screamed in fear. Tong Mu looked at the explosion, and he became spirited again. He looked at the black dog that was swallowed by the flames, and a look of hope appeared in his eyes. Burn that black dog to death. Tong Mu roared in his heart, but his roar didn't last for long. In the end, it turned into despair. The flames suddenly shrank, and in the end, all of them entered the black dog's mouth. The black dog grinned, and it let out a burp that was spewing flames. The expression on its face was a little strange. The taste isn't bad, Lord Go muttered. Everyone was shocked, and not a single sound could be heard. Tong Mu didn't know what expression he should use to express his current feelings. 3-star true immortal realm? No, definitely not. This dog might be a 4-star true immortal realm existence. It might even be a 5-star true immortal realm existence. Such existences were extremely rare in Immortal City. Existences with such cultivation would have long gone to the Heaven Tree to comprehend the Tao on the Heaven Tree. Tong Mu's legs went soft, and he directly sat on the ground. He was a genius, but in the end, he was defeated by a dog. What kind of mockery was this? What kind of despair was this? Lord Go indifferently looked at Tong Mu, and his eyes narrowed. In the next instant, a paw slapped out. This paw was extremely fast, and in an instant, it was above Tong Mu's head. If it slapped down, Tong Mu would definitely die. However, just as Tong Mu was about to be slapped to death by the paw, a long howl rang out, and it came from afar. An unparalleled might was released, and it filled the entire sky. Everyone's hearts tightened, and their bodies trembled. In the sky, a gray-robed old man appeared with his hands clasped behind his back. It was as though he had teleported. Every time he took a step, his figure would shrink the ground to inches. In the end, the old man appeared beside Tong Mu. The old man had a head full of white hair, but his eyes were filled with a bright light. When he raised his head to look at the paw, his pupils shrank. This familiar paw, is that dog really back? A long howl rang out from his mouth. True energy revolved around the old man's body, and in the next instant, he sent a palm towards the paw above his head. Boom! The ground around the old man collapsed, and a huge paw print appeared. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events. They sucked in a breath of cold air, and none of them could say a single word. This battle was completely out of their expectations. That invincible dog had completely changed their view of the world. That's the Tong family's head, right? That's right. He's wearing a gray robe. He should be the Tong family's head, Tong Woody. Oh my God, even the Tong family's head is here. He's in existence at the 5-star, true immortal realm. When the surrounding crowd saw that figure, they sucked in a breath of cold air, and their pupils shrank continuously. They never imagined that an encirclement against a mortal would actually draw out the Tong family's head. The position of the head of an aristocratic family was second only to the city lord in Immortal City. This kind of existence was usually in charge of the aristocratic family, and outsiders wouldn't be able to see him. However, at this moment, he actually appeared. As expected, Tong Mu's talent was too high. Even the Tong family's head couldn't let Tong Mu die in vain. The smoke and dust dispersed. Everyone's pupils shrank. The Lord Go floated in the air, and his dog tail swayed from side to side. The Lord Go let out a soft cry of surprise. He was a little surprised that his paw was actually blocked by someone. Whoosh! The gray-robed old man waved his hand, and a gust of wind blew away the smoke and dust. Tong Woody looked at the Lord Go in the air, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. As expected, it's this dog. The Lord Go raised his head, and his dog eyes looked down at Tong Woody. Their gazes seemed to collide in the air. In the end, Tong Woody retreated. If they really fought, Even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for this black dog. In the past, this black dog was an overlord in the Heaven Chief realm, and no one dared to provoke it. If it wasn't for the fact that this mangy dog suffered an inexplicable injury and was chased out of the Heaven Chief realm by several Chelan chefs from the Heaven Chief realm, there might still be rumors of this black dog circulating in the Heaven Chief realm. This was a mad dog, a dog that stood at the top of the food chain. It ate immortal fruits, immortal tools, immortal flames, and it even wanted to eat the heaven tree. It even dared to bite the heavenly path. He couldn't provoke such an existence. Then, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Tong Woody cupped his fists respectfully and bowed to the Lord Go in the air. That was the way a junior bowed to a senior. The crowd sucked in a breath of cold air once more. They felt as though their worldview had collapsed. What kind of god was this dog? Mu Lunar's eyes were also blank. Of course, she knew the head of the Tong family, Tong Woody. As the daughter of the city lord, she knew many powerful existences in the immortal city. However, she had never seen the head of an aristocratic family being so respectful. Even when facing her own father, the city lord of the #1 immortal city, he didn't show such respect. What kind of origin did this dog have? As for Bu Fong, what kind of origin did he have? Did he come from the mortal world? Impossible. The Lord Go indifferently glanced at Tong Woody. The corners of his mouth twitched, and under Tong Woody's gaze, he waved his paw in boredom. In the next instant, the Lord Go walked like a cat and slowly returned to the restaurant. Tong Woody's body tensed up. When the Lord Go turned around, he let out a long breath. Then, he solemnly looked at the Lord Go. In the end, he grabbed the limp Tong Mu, who had lost an arm, and soared into the sky. He sped toward the inner region of the immortal city, disappearing in an instant. The Tong family's crusade against mortal chefs finally came to an end with an unbelievable scene. Even the head of the Tong family was alarmed. An existence that even the head of the Tong family had to respect. This restaurant wasn't ordinary. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't know how to express their feelings. The Lord Go wagged his tail and walked like a cat. Bu Fong brat, give the Lord Go a piece of red braised meat first. This smell is too fragrant. The Lord Go is craving it. The Lord Go used his magnetic voice to speak to Bu Fong. Bu Fong recovered from his thoughts, and he looked at the place where Tong Woody disappeared. The Lord Go seemed to have done something incredible in the Heaven Chief realm. Moreover, Bu Fong felt that the Lord Go's identity would soon be revealed. Chapter 988. The storm seemed to have ended just like that. Tong Mu was brought away by the Tong family's head, leaving behind a pile of rubble and a group of dumbfounded onlookers. They never imagined that the final outcome would be like this. The Tong family had come in a threatening manner, but in the end, they were almost annihilated. The high-spirited, silver-armored guards were filled with an aura that soared to the heavens. They displayed an invincible stance, but in the end, they were all destroyed by the dog's paw. Even the Tong family's head, Tong Woody, had to be respectful when facing that black dog. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. It was as though they had discovered something extraordinary. Mu Luer was the most shocked. She understood the power that every family head had. Even the family head had to show respect to this black dog. This dog, what kind of divine being was it? Creak! The doors of the restaurant were closed. With a loud bang, the doors were completely shut. This blocked the curiosity of the onlookers outside. Their hearts were itching, and they were filled with curiosity. They really wanted to open the door and carefully observe that black dog. However, they didn't have the courage to do so. The terror of that black dog was still vivid in their minds. The scene of it killing 15 silver-armored guards with a single paw left a deep impression in their minds. The onlookers dispersed. However, the scene that had just happened in front of the restaurant was also being spread. Inside the restaurant, Uncle Mu was panting heavily. His injuries were quite serious. He was struck by Tong Mu's spear, and his body was almost blasted into a hole. This left a shadow in his heart. Fortunately, the ruby-like red braised pork emitted a rich aroma. This aroma stimulated his appetite and made him feel that the pain in his wound seemed to have dissipated a lot. In the distance, that black dog had returned. It walked elegantly like a cat, and the fur on its body was spotless. When the dog arrived in front of the dining table, it climbed up the chair. Its paws rested on the table, and its eyes turned to look at the red braised meat in the bowl. It opened its mouth, and its tongue stuck out. Bufong, Mu Luer, and the others also returned, and they returned to the dining table. Bufong walked to the kitchen, stood in the middle of a circle of tables, and looked at them indifferently. Bufong, young man, the mangy dog is back. Shouldn't we start? Hades era was already hungry and thirsty. His saliva was almost dripping out of his mouth. He didn't care about the situation outside at all, because he knew very well that there was no suspense about the outcome. Although that mangy dog was a bit shameless, there was no need to doubt its strength. Even in hell, no one dared to offend him. Even in Nether Prison, he was an existence that was ranked at the top. In an immortal city, who could do anything to him? Mu Luder's eyes turned and landed on Hades era. At this moment, the shock in her heart had calmed down a lot. However, the more he calmed down, the more he felt that something was amiss. The mangy dog was extraordinary, and this handsome youth in front of him seemed to be extraordinary as well. Young Pavilion Master, the Tong family's silver-armored guards have retreated? Uncle Mu clutched his chest, furrowing his brows as he asked. That shouldn't be the case. With the temper of Tong Mu's silver-armored guards, if they didn't move the restaurant, they shouldn't have retreated. Earlier, an intense battle had occurred outside, but Uncle Mu wasn't too sure about the outcome. Uncle Mu, the silver-armored guards, have been completely wiped out. Only Tong Mu is left, and he was brought back by the Tong family's head. Mu Luer said with difficulty. She realized that when she said those words, her mouth was dry. Uncle Mu froze, and his eyes shrank. All right, now, let's taste the 8 treasures braised pork. Just as Uncle Mu was about to open his mouth to ask about the details, Bufong's indifferent voice interrupted his train of thought. Bufong's heart shook. In an instant, a blue and white porcelain plate appeared on the table. Steam rose from the ceramic bowls, and the steam billowed. It was like a ruby that was dazzling and piercing to the eyes. Bufong held a pair of chopsticks. He picked up a piece of 8 treasures braised pork. Swish, viscous, rosy gravy flowed down the piece of meat, dripping into the ceramic bowl. This piece of meat looked very fatty, and it was incomparably rosy. The top layer was a layer of pig skin, which was sparkling and translucent. Under the light, it seemed to be sparkling. In the middle, there was a layer of meat fat, which was incomparably soft. At the bottom, there was a layer of lean meat, and the gravy flowed down from the veins. It looked like it was constantly teasing one's taste buds. Bufong placed the 8 treasures braised pork on a plate and passed it to the Lord Go. After that, he picked up pieces of meat, placed them in a blue and white porcelain bowls, and passed them to the others. The number of pieces of meat wasn't small, but there were also many people present. After all the pieces were eaten, Bufong only had 1 piece left. Everyone looked at the pieces of meat in their porcelain bowls, and they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. There was a layer of gravy on the piece of meat, and it was incomparably thick. 8 treasures braised pork, please have a taste, Bufong said. In the next instant, everyone's eyes lit up, and they started to dig in. The Lord Go was the most direct, and he started to eat. Hades era didn't hesitate to pick up the piece of braised pork with his chopsticks, stuffing it into his mouth. After stuffing it into his mouth, his entire mouth bulged, and he started to chew unceasingly. Yu's table manners were quite elegant. She picked up the braised pork and took a bite. Hua and Hades era's table manners were somewhat similar. Their small mouths actually stuffed the entire piece of meat into their mouths. As the daughter of the city lord, Mu Luer had tasted many delicacies, and she naturally had standards for table manners. She calmly picked up the piece of meat with her chopsticks and took a small bite. The first bite was on the fatty part. The pig skin was cooked until it looked like a crystal, and when it was stained with a rosy gravy, it was extremely beautiful, and it was filled with a sense of beauty. Fat, but not greasy. This was Mu Luer's first thought. The fatty meat was very soft and tender, and it didn't have that disgusting greasy texture. There was even a kind of refreshing taste, which made people's stomachs squirm. Good? Delicious. Mu Luer's eyes widened. Was this really cooked by Bu Fong? That mortal chef in the lower realm had really improved a lot. As a professional judge of the Heaven Chief's dishes, Manager Chen naturally treated this 8 treasures braised pork very seriously. The more he tasted it, the more he felt that this 8 treasures braised pork was extraordinary. The first bite, when the pig skin and the teeth came into contact, the slight friction caused people's bodies to tremble. After biting down, the white and tender meat was revealed. A little bit of oil flowed out from the place where the meat had been bitten. The gravy was wrapped in oil, emitting a rich meat fragrance. That fragrance seemed to condense into a substance, lingering in the mouth and nose. The second bite was on the fatty part of the meat. That part was even more tender, as though it would melt in the mouth. He didn't even need to chew. When the fatty meat entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current, flowing down his throat and into his stomach. His mouth was filled with a rich fragrance. If it was someone else's red braised pork, such a fat piece of meat would make the top of the mouth feel numb. Then they would instantly feel that the meat was tasteless. However, this 8 treasures braised pork didn't feel that way. Fat, but not greasy, and the fragrance didn't disperse. Manager Chen's heart was filled with admiration. He took another bite. This time, he bit down on the lean part of the meat. This part was harder than the pig skin and the fatty meat, but the taste wasn't much worse. Although the lean meat was hard, it contained a meaty fragrance, which made it even more difficult to chew. The more he chewed, the more he could taste the meat's flavor. This is a perfect red braised pork. Manager Chen exclaimed in admiration. This dish wasn't any weaker than the dishes cooked by the second-grade Heaven Chief. Manager Chen was fortunate enough to taste the dishes cooked by the second-grade Heaven Chief before. The taste of that dish was still unforgettable to him. Although Bu Fong's 8 treasures braised pork didn't have such a strong taste, it wasn't weak either. Of course, it was definitely delicious. The only thing it lacked was the condensation of immortal energy. Uncle Mu remained silent. The piece of 8 treasures braised pork had been completely devoured by him. Even the gravy on the plate had been licked clean. As the braised pork entered his stomach, Uncle Mu felt that his injuries from the fight with Tong Yu were almost healed. This piece of meat contained dense essence, energy, and spiritual energy, and it allowed his injuries to recover faster. It was no wonder that the Heaven Chief was able to become the most respected profession in Immortal City. He truly had extraordinary methods. Bu Fong also finished his dompa pork. He let out a long breath. The fragrance of the bamboo leaves and the smell of the medicinal herbs were perfectly infused into the meat. It caused the greasy taste of the pork to dissipate, enhancing the taste. Looking at everyone who was immersed in the taste of the food, Bu Fong's lips curled up slightly. Cooking a dish that could make people enjoy it so much that they forgot to leave was a kind of happiness for a chef. After waiting for a while, everyone recovered from the aftertaste of the 8 treasures braised pork. Mu Luer looked at Bu Fong with a complicated expression on her face. After Lord Go finished eating, he twisted his butt and returned to the corner. He laid down and slept. Hua also followed him, hugging Lord Go's thigh as he slept. The Black Dragon King looked at Hua with satisfaction, occasionally rubbing his bald head. You returned to your room to sleep. Soon, only Hades Era, Bu Fong, and the others were left in the restaurant. Mu Luer looked at Bu Fong and took a deep breath. Congratulations to Owner Bu for improving your cooking skills, Mu Luer said sincerely. Moreover, Mu Luer and Bu Fong's relationship wasn't bad. Bu Fong raised the corner of his mouth and nodded. Thank you. Owner Bu, since you've become the Heaven Chief, you should consider joining an aristocratic family, Mu Luer said solemnly. Her words surprised Bu Fong. Why did he want to join an aristocratic family? Mu Luer seemed to have seen through Bu Fong's thoughts, and a smile appeared on her face. Honorbu, you don't know. After becoming an immortal chef, your next goal is to become a second-grade heaven chief. However, a second-grade heaven chief is different from an immortal chef. If you want to become a second-grade heaven chief, you need to perfect all aspects. You need to have your own immortal tool, immortal flame, and your mental force must reach a certain level. And to achieve all these, you need resources. These resources exist in the ruins of the Heaven Chief realm. Mu Luer explained. Bu Fong listened seriously and didn't say anything. In the distance, Manager Chun stroked his beard. That's why Owner Bu needs to join an aristocratic family. Why? Bu Fong furrowed his brows. Because only by joining an aristocratic family can you obtain the qualifications to enter the ruins. Mu Luer said, in a mortal city, the number of Heaven Chief is relatively small. Every time a Heaven Chief appears, an aristocratic family will try to rope them in. This is because if the aristocratic family wants to obtain more resources in the ruins, they need more Heaven Chief. Bu Fong nodded. He understood Mu Luer's meaning. His heaven and earth obsidian flame couldn't support his current cooking. Thus, he needed to consider finding a higher grade immortal flame. However, to find an immortal flame, he needed to enter the ruins. And to enter the ruins, he needed to join an aristocratic family. While Bu Fong was deep in thought, Mu Luer opened her mouth and said, Is Owner Bu having a headache about which aristocratic family to join? Her words caused Bu Fong to be slightly stunned. Suddenly, Mu Luer stood up from her seat and stretched out her hand toward Bu Fong. My Immortal City Lore Mansion's Mu family hopes that Owner Bu can join us, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.